turn that down a little bit. Pretty chill with the background music. It's good background music. Yeah, let me turn that down to smooth listening. What's up, everybody? I am so happy that I found that site that I linked in the Discord with all of the copyright-free music. Because I've said it before, I don't listen to a lot of music. I'm not super into music, as in general. But finding that site and knowing, hey, every single thing on here you will not get copyright struck for is great. There's like hundreds of songs, and sometimes I just go on and I just like listen to them like one at a time while I'm doing something else, because I can like just like feel confident that they're all gonna work, and I don't have to like research them separately. What up? My cat is unhappy with Mega because I moved from the couch to cuddle pile to my computer. It's a big tragedy. That is a tragedy. I agree. Exactly, Charm. Okay, let's get into it fast. Let's get into it quick. I'm trying to make this more directed experience for the VOD watchers. Let's get into it. What are we doing today? The thumbnail was pretty. I agree. That's all Eden. That is all Eden. If you've noticed this kind of new style in the thumbnails, that's all Eden, and I love it. I'm super excited about it. So today we are doing kind of two things. Well, sort of. Little mini thing, and then into the big thing. Big thing, obviously, change 1.3 to Daggerheart, seeing what they changed, if I like it, if I don't like it, what have you. And then a little mini thing before that is my big pros and cons coming out of the out of me playtesting Sablewood Messengers, because I have a lot of opinions on the game as a whole, very long and detailed opinions that are in the other streams. But I wanted to really highlight my really big takeaways, like the really, really major points. And before I get into that, I also wanna start off right at the top of this pros and cons list, and say, hey, I know there are going to be cons on here, and I want to make it very clear that overall, I like this system a lot. I really want to run more Daggerheart. I'm actually trying to convince Paige to let me teach her Daggerheart, because I think that she will like running our head-to-head game in Daggerheart more than in D&D. So I like Daggerheart a lot. I want to play it more, but I'm also gonna have cons. Really interested in your takes, having done it literally yesterday. yeah, fair enough. Okay, well, let's get into it then. My big pros and cons, personally, are as follows. I did a little bit of pre-stream work, So, my big pros and cons. I'll start with the pros first. 2d12, love it, and this is in general the whole the duality die system. I love that it makes like a little probability pyramid, so you're going to be rolling on average more often. I think that the hope and the fear works perfectly. Like, I think in my games, I cannot remember a single time where my two players, who had both done next to no research on the game, I cannot remember a single time where they forgot about hope and fear on their rolls. It was, and which is one thing that I was like very minorly worried about. But I think it works. I think it feels right. I give a big thumbs up to 2d12. Next pro, fear, DM fear. I kind of talked about it at the end of the playtest stream. I absolutely love having a common resource as a GM that I can use for several different things. Now, that is balanced again a con which I have, which is GM complexity, but I did separate these because specifically having this common resource that I can use for things like, what you would think of in D&D as like a layer action or an environmental effect versus, special abilities on my monsters versus, taking a turn early. I think that having one common resource that players can see, they can see in front of them how much I have, I think it's perfect. I love fear. Love it. Absolutely love it. And then the last pro is degrees of success. I think that it's something that will take some getting used to. Like, I don't think I was good at this during my play, but it's very, like, I think it's very clear to the players very quickly. What up, Braca? I think it's very, very clear to the players what's going on, right? It is you failed and they see fear, they see hope. You succeed, they see hope, they see fear. Like, the degrees of success are very clear and obvious, which I really, really like. It's one of my kind of, I don't even think it's a problem, but I do think this is a preference thing of in D&D, whenever you use degrees of success with multiple different DC values, your players can't see that. So if you give them something ambiguous, say something equivalent to succeeding with fear or failing with hope, right? You give them a bit of both on their role in D&D. They don't know if that was like the full success and you're just deciding to give them something negative as well because of like the thing that they chose to do, or if they failed, but they don't know how to make you fail cleanly, so they're also kind of giving you this success. Like, it's just so murky in D&D, and I much prefer this. It's much more clear, and I think that overall, I think that is a boon towards DM or GM player communication. So I really, really like the degrees of success in this game. I also specifically like it being built into the very fabric of the game rather than being kind of like an off to the side optional rule. I like it being built in. So these are my big pros after running it. Cons. GM complexity. I found it, I felt like there were a lot of balls that I had to juggle as a GM. And these are kind of related to each other, this GM complexity, player responsibility. But to focus on GM responsibility, it felt like there were a lot of balls I had to juggle, and there were a lot of decisions that I had to make as a GM, especially during combat, that I don't normally have to make. So while I like degrees of success being built into the fabric, it's an added layer of GM complexity. That would be okay on its own. Fear. Having this common resource where, I can use it for this, or I can use it for that, or I have this whole list of things that I can use it for. Isolated, very cool, very interesting. But they sort of start to build on each other. We've talked about targeting priority a lot in D&D, like when looking at the Critical Role live streams. We've talked about like what a complex decision targeting priority can be when thinking about, what are adversaries doing during D&D combat. That's not even to consider which adversaries you activate, right? Like, Daggerheart immediately adds an additional layer, and I think a much more difficult layer of decision making for the DM, where the DM now has to decide not only who am I targeting on the PC side, but which adversaries am I even activating. And even that, like, on the surface, kind of cool. Eh, but it's all of these things put together. It's like having a ton of options for fear, kind of cool. Having degrees of success built into the very fabric, cool, but complex. Choosing like, okay, I'm going to activate this adversary, but not that adversary. And like, that's how I'm going to spend my turn tokens as a GM. Lots of upside there, lots of room, like really, really high level that you can get out of that if you're really good at it. But all of these things add complexity together. And that's not even considering turn tracking, fear tracking. It's making sure that you're assigning like stress appropriately for failures. There's just a lot going on. And making sure that you're tracking conditions as well. But that's, something that D&D has as well. But there's a lot on the GM's plate, I feel. I definitely dropped some balls in my play. I'm interested to see how much the complexity goes down with familiarity, but if it doesn't, that's definitely a problem. And that is my thing, is I think that a lot of complexity will go down. Like, I think just in general, the feeling of complexity will absolutely go down through familiarity. Absolutely. But right now, I feel like there's just a lot. And I am nervous currently, and that's why I put it on my con, that it will not go down enough. And that's sort of related to the next con, which is player responsibility. So I ran it in sort of an extreme environment. I ran it with maybe the minimum possible without getting into like head-to-heads, like one-on-one, which is, its own kind of separate thing. But running it with 2 players was really interesting because I think to me, it really highlighted an extreme case where, and I think it really brought this player responsibility to the forefront. And I spent a lot of time thinking about whether or not this concept that I'm putting in as a con, I spent a long time thinking about, was this just because it was 2 players? Or is there something there, right? Daggerheart claims to be 2 to 5 players, so you were on the extreme, but we're in their professed sweet spot. So, and so I was thinking, like, I was basically trying to decide, is this only an issue for low player counts, or do I think this is an issue for potentially all player counts? And I did kind of land on, I'll have to test it. But I'm worried that this could be a con for all player counts. Because there is, in a similar way to the GM needing to decide which adversaries go, right? My worry is that the freedom of any player can go at any time. I remember when we were reading over the rules, someone professed worry about, the quieter players getting steamrolled. And I didn't give that worry much credence. I didn't, especially with the turn tracker and with the turn tokens, I kind of thought, I don't think that'll be as much of an issue. The thing that I didn't think about is even if the quiet player isn't getting steamrolled, your players have to constantly have a plan. They can never tune out, which, like, to a degree sounds like a good thing if they can never, tune out. But they can't just say, like, oh, I'm going to do my thing on my turn, and then, we'll see the outcome, and then I'll have a whole other, round cycle to determine what I'm going to do on my next turn. They have to constantly be thinking, oh, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and then maybe they'll do that if this person does this, because you never know when the GM is going to go. You never know when your other players are going to go. I definitely feel like this sort of system, and it's very interesting because it's not something I've ever felt in Blades. But I think the reason I've never felt it in Blades is because Blades has a very different cadence to it. Bitty has a very different cadence where every single action, there's no combat, there's no, skill challenges. All of it is either just real time or downtime. So within real time, it is, in terms of like when the players go versus when the GM goes, right? Players, GM. It is always the PC takes an action, 2d6, they get some result. The GM updates the world. I have no idea what to represent updates the world. The GM updates the world. Always. No matter what the PC rolls, no matter what the result is, no matter what the DC, the position, the effect, the GM always immediately updates the world. That could have consequences, that could not. Then we go back to a PC action, 3d6, whatever. GM updates the world. It's a very back and forth sort of cadence in Bitty. I think my problem and where I kind of identify the most maybe the player responsibility side of this is in Daggerheart. The cadence is much more, so PCs, GM, the cadence is much more unpredictable. It might be 2d12, and then depending on the result, it's another 2d12, maybe the same person, maybe not, or it's a GM, like, consequence, and then back to this. But it also might not be a consequence because it might be a consequence and then the GM decides to take another turn and then the GM decides to take another turn. Like, there's this much more complicated system where you don't really know who's going to go next at any given time in Daggerheart. And that's, again, it's sort of like the GM complexity, where I don't identify it as a quintessentially like bad thing, but because I think that it could allow for it's much more flexible. It could allow for very interesting moments, very interesting stories to be told if you're really good at it. But there's a lot of responsibility on their side because they never know who's going to go next. And I think that you're going to see this be much more of a prevalent thing the lower the player count is. Because when you have 4, 5 players, whatever, you will have the players sharing that burden a lot more, right? They will very much be like, oh, I just went, you go next, whatever. But I think that this, even in those higher player counts, the thing that I really thought about is essentially analysis paralysis. Because I think right now, and during like Sablewood Messengers, overall, Sablewood Messengers was pretty easy. Like, it wasn't overly difficult. But I think if you're running Daggerheart and you put the players into a combat or situation where, or specifically a combat, where maybe they're low on resources or it's meant to be very, very difficult and they can't easily just switch. Because I think like right now, if you have like 4 players and one player's just gone a bunch, and even if maybe they have the optimal thing to do, they could just kind of pass it off to another player because again, Sablewood Messengers wasn't all that difficult. But if you put them into a really difficult position, I think that that level of player responsibility of them debating about what to do and them being like, well, if you go, then this might happen. And if you rolled fear, then, you would get hit with this stress. And I can really see, and I'm a little bit worried about essentially getting analysis paralysis during combat, which D&D, while it's a risk in D&D, ultimately you have to take your turn and you have to do something on your turn. And you doing something is not essentially taking up someone else's turn, right? So there's no opportunity cost. Whereas Daggerheart introduces a direct opportunity cost. If you go, someone else couldn't in that moment. And every time you go, you're risking the GM going. So from a puzzle solving standpoint, I think it's going to be harder to present those sorts of things. So that's one of my big worries. Let's read. Oh my gosh, we got lots of comments, lots of chats. Oh my gosh, people ran 1.3 last night. Let's see. I also had 2 players and opted not to modify the last battle, which ended up killing our Marlowe. Battle was pretty cinematic and spectacular that way, though. Did not drag on too long. Hell yeah. AKL, hell yeah. I didn't modify the last battle. And I definitely think I think that the thing that I really did come home with is I really don't think player count changes balance too much. I think it still changes it to a degree because you have less flexibility in like the resources and the things that you can do. And like, you have less HP pools and less stress pools to, get hit with. But it doesn't change it nearly as dramatically as in something like D&D. It's definitely a lesser balancing lever. I had 5 players, and the last battle was surprisingly long, but they were never in much danger. Small sample size, but suggests maybe a correlation to party size. I would say that it lasting long, if I had to guess, this is pure speculation. Obviously, I wasn't at your table, but I would guess that is partially one of the things that I'm kind of hitting on with this player responsibility is at 2-player tables, even if they get stuck into analysis paralysis mode or whatever, ultimately, there's not as many decision points, right? With a larger table, a larger player count, it is a lot of debate around, okay, are you going to go or am I going to go? Or if this happens, are you going to do that? Even in a relatively safe fight. I don't know. The pure speculation. Obviously, I wasn't at your table. But that is one thing that I would guess. It rewards players for being adaptable, hence less spells for your wizard to thumb through for 30 minutes while the rest of us snack. Absolutely, Ryan. And that's the thing with both of these cons. It's really tough because they both derive from an incredible amount of adaptability and flexibility and agency for both the GM and the players. Like, the GM and the players have so much flexibility to do cool stuff with both of these things. But I worry that the guardrails have almost come too far off. That is my main concern, is that I think the guardrails are potentially too far. So one of the things I would be looking for is like a reduced amount of way to use fears, like to use fear dice, like, or to not use fear dice, use fear points, right? That's one of the things I would be looking at. Honestly, this sounds kind of fucked, but getting rid of crits. Like, I think, frankly, I would just get rid of crits. Like, to try and simplify down degrees of success. Like, I think that there are things that you can do to potentially reduce these two factors while keeping the core of what they are. And a lot of times, that is just reducing the things that they can do only down to the absolute coolest things. Or only down to the absolute most interesting things. So that's one of the things that I'm looking for, you know. But we'll see. I don't know. We will see. Let's see. But those are just two examples, right? There are other ways that you could also reduce these complexities and these responsibilities, but Those are just two easy ones off the top of my head. Well, I say easy ones. They would be easy to implement. I'm not necessarily saying that they would be good. I haven't thought through them enough yet. But those are the two directions, or two of directions that you could go in. I was worried about player responsibility going into it, but my players didn't express any complaints. They are Minnesota nice, though, so maybe they just didn't say. Well, and I don't even know that. I don't remember my players expressing complaints either. But again, what I really worry about is if I started to scale up the drama and the stakes and the danger, right? Sablewood was relatively easy and, not within the context of a larger campaign. So I think that my players and likely your players were more maybe willy-nilly with it. They didn't much care if Marlowe died, if it was a cool moment. If this is a character you've been running with for a year, you want the death to be more than just a cool moment. So I think there are potentially some differences there. The players actually have more control over what order they go in if they collaborate, but you're right that the monster turn is far less predictable. Oh, everyone has more control. The GM has more control, and the players have more control. That's why I labeled this as responsibility. There's not a lack of control here. There is an unprecedented level of control on both sides. Yes, neither side can predict each other, but both sides individually have insane amounts of control compared to something like D&D or some other system. Yeah, I fully agree with you there. I've definitely not gotten the impression it felt hard for any of the players in the games I've seen so far. One player did suggest clarifying ahead of time which types of world building people would be comfortable helping out with. Like maybe I can happily improv about clothing styles, but hates coming up with names that could be flagged in advance. I do agree. And that's not even really where I'm focusing my player responsibility critique, is because that is pretty firmly, like, I think that you can kind of, when it comes to like the world building thing that Daggerheart recommends, I think you can pretty firmly, set table ground rules. It's not really built into the system where like players have to do that. So even if none of your players were comfortable with any amount of world building, it's not going to break the system. So yeah, I agree there. A lot of us nerds do have areas of interest that could be made relevant to the story, which could be good to know for the GM in advance, especially playing with relative strangers online. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sedwood Messengers has some really subtle and awesome things in it. The Wraith ability to make them relive a childhood fear encourages role-playing even in combat. Chef's Kiss. I did love that ability. In retrospect, I wish I just wouldn't have used the Ghost Punch and try like the punch them out of their body ability. I absolutely really, really did like that adversary ability, Daniel. And I think it's pretty clear that like even within combat, they're trying to, tell those dramatic and interesting stories. So I've liked the adversary so far. I've liked the adversary design a lot. I think it's one of the things that, maybe I wouldn't have honed in so much on fear if the uses for fear weren't so good in that last combat. I loved them. I absolutely loved them. Timidus not changing the battle is meaningful because of the 1.3 update. All the balance changed and they didn't release a new campaign, so the numbers are off. Oh, interesting. For the record, I also wound up running the pre-built with odd balance numbers. Interesting. I'm very eager to try out and learn environment moves as a general thing. Absolutely. Since I'm new, I'm not familiar with lair actions before, at least not as a GM. Yeah, this goes back to the fear thing. The environment move was so cool, and using the same resource that you use for special adversary moves. I love it. I love fear. It's an amazing mechanic. I really, really, really like it. What up, Brittany? How you doing? If it ever seems like I'm disagreeing strongly with you, I mostly don't. Both of your cons are very valid, even if I nitpick the edges of them. Oh, no, fair enough, Daniel. I totally get it. Yeah, no worries at all. We ran completely 1.2 with old character sheets, ignoring Demiplane. Fair enough. Thankfully the QSA has been updated now, so I can use that next time. Yeah. If you get rid of crits, then crit roll is just roll. You know, Ryan, I can't argue with that. I cannot. You make a good point, Ryan. We only had a single crit all night last night. I think we were the same. Yeah. The only problem with removing crits is what happens with a tie now. It's not with fear or hope. Because someone brought this up when I originally kind of complained about crits. I would make ties roll with hope. So it's like there's a tone of like hope wins out over fear. I just wouldn't make them auto successes. So like if you rolled snake eyes, that's a 2 with hope. So like hope wins ties. Is what I would do. I don't think that it would be that overly impactful, but those are the types of changes that I would try to make. Because right now, the degrees of success, there are 5 degrees that the GM has to kind of contend with. And I think that what I would like to see to remove some of this GM complexity is to keep a lot of the bones, but just slim them down a little bit. So go from 5 degrees of success to 4 degrees. Take fear from, I don't even know how many things you could use fear for, like 8 down to maybe like 4 or 5. That's what I'm really looking for out of this sort of update, is slimming those things down a lot. I also ended up pointing a camera at a paper map and tokens on my end, play online, including a card showing action tokens and fear pool seem to work okay. Honestly, Timpanist, I think that is probably how I would do it, at least for the playtest. My hope is that there comes along some VTT updates, either for Roll20 or Foundry or whatever, once that's allowed, because I know right now that's not allowed for very fair reasons. So I'm hoping that eventually VTTs will have features that make that tracking easier, but I think I would probably go in a similar direction, Timpanist. Oh, excuse me. Timpanist is I could very much see that being a better way to do it, but even then, one of the problems is and this is another layer of both player responsibility and GM complexity, is tracking turns. The fact that you have to track every single turn with a turn token, I haven't gone back and watched the VOD. I would be shocked if I missed none of their turns. Like the amount of times, I would guess it was double digits. The amount of times that I either forgot to mark a turn token, or I forgot to like contribute a turn token for one of the players. Now, at a in-person game, the players would be responsible for doing that, and I do think that if you're all in the same room with physical tokens, that's not as much of an ask. Like, I think that it's a little bit more intuitive, and it would be, you would get into a rhythm. And I also think that is something that will hopefully reduce a lot with, or that will hopefully become a lot easier with familiarity. But it is just a lot of these things, like, again, individually, I don't really have any problems with, but added all together, I do really think that the combat in Daggerheart was more complex to run with low-leveled characters. Like, let's compare like level, even if you want to say like level 2 PCs in D&D versus level 1, because it's max level 10 versus max level 20. Like a level 2 PC in D&D versus a level 1 PC in Daggerheart. I legitimately think that combat, that Sablewood Messengers combat, was more complex to run from both sides of the table. And that the players had a lot more responsibility and thinking that they had to do. Now that all that's going to reduce with familiarity, but I'm worried about the long-term ramifications of that if you want to make combats increasingly more complex. Oh, we are on 1.3 characters and a 1.2 adventure. They updated the quick start. Oh, they updated the quick start. Very nice. Cool. I hope people keep doing actual plays of 1.3 version as eagerly as they did with 1.2, because I feel like I need a lot more data on the ways to run combat, pseudo initiative or not. You know, maybe they will. I will say that I think, you know, as we get further and further away from the 1.2 like open release, I think you're going to see a lot less of it. I think, you know, a lot of creators, and I am the exact same. I was breaking news chasing of like Daggerheart's hot right now. It's getting searched a lot. You know, we need to put out something quick and you know, run it. I absolutely think that there will be still 1.3 actual plays out there. I just think the density of them will go down a lot as Daggerheart gets more and more, I don't want to say mundane, but as it gets less and less like, woo, shiny new thing. But I can tell you, I am still planning out another Daggerheart play, I think probably of Sablewood Messengers. But we'll see. I'm planning out more Daggerheart stuff, but I'm also trying to plan out how I want to. I mean, I guess it's a little bit of a leak. I don't know, a little bit of a leak. I've said in the past I have very little desire to run a long-term actual play, like a campaign type actual play, or even like a, maybe you could call it a limited series, or you could call it, very tight storyline like Dimension 20s. But I have been thinking a lot about how to run one-shots consistently and potentially in a shared world. I don't know. I've been really debating how it could be possible, how I could consistently run it well. I've been having some thoughts on one-shots though. And I very much, regardless of what my strategy is overall, I think you will have more Daggerheart one-shots coming from me. Can't guarantee that there'll be 1.3, because I will say the breaking news chasing of trying to get out that 1.2 playtest, hated it. I loved the thing that I made. I loved playing it. I'm still very happy with it, but the timeline pressure, not for me. Will not be doing that anymore. So I have no idea when it's coming. Really, it might be a cool GM principle to give all places environment moves, not just in combat. A way to brainstorm with hope and with fear scene changes while planning. Yeah, I agree, Timpanist. I think that the only slight problem with that would be just the amount of pre-prep that is. But if you're already a pretty high prep DM, I could very much see that being valid and being a very interesting thing. And I would bet you might start to see some recommended environment moves based on biome. So like a table of environment moves when you're in a tavern, or a table of environment moves when you're in the desert, that sort of thing. And I think that developing those tables is something that you could do on your own as a GM. But also absolutely something that I think, especially when Daggerheart hits, full release, I think you will see tables of environment moves. Might just be me, but it helps me think. It helps me to think, what would this town square do to either help or harm the party, if that makes sense. No, I think that very much makes sense. Yeah. My players were very helpful and reminded me that they had taken an action, and I forgot to add another square. Hell yeah. I mean, that's good. I'll slightly tie it back to that, the player responsibility piece, but I think that's good to be collaborative like that. I wish they had done a new quick start for that reason, though it would take effort away from the actual game. Yeah, true. It would. It definitely would. I'm still interested. I'm sure interest will wax and wane. I'm in multiple servers for channels who have done DH APs who are organizing several private or Patreon based game though. Yeah, I think you'll see a lot of them go paywalled, which is totally fair. I don't begrudge that at all. A lot of people run private games, and it's a large source of income for a lot of D&D content creators or TTRPG content creators. I think Mike runs private games. That's also something I don't see myself doing. But yeah, I could definitely see them all a lot of them taking it private. It also allowed them to focus on areas of the rules they specifically want testing on by making it a focus of the QSA. That's fair, Daniel. I do think that would be interesting. I think that I don't know how much time and effort Sablewood Messengers took them. But honestly, I have to imagine that they could maybe hire like one extra person just to make QSAs and focus, because I think, Daniel, you make a very good point that they could absolutely design the QSAs to hone in on things that they really, really want feedback on, that edition. I think ultimately it probably depends on how many versions they predict. I think if they were going to have, 10 versions, if that's what they expected, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, my prediction is that they will have less. I am sort of assuming that they will probably go up to like 1.5 and then maybe hit full release. I'm not sure, though. That's complete guesswork and speculation and intuition. Yeah. What up, Zenshi? Nah, I don't think this is just general stuff from my my big, I'd say my 5 big takeaways from my playtest. I am intrigued by the environments. It came out too soon to my running to feel comfortable adding last minute. Unfortunately, next session will probably have one or more. I agree. I completely agree. And if I had more time to think and to prep, I might have involved it more. Yeah. I'm going to be a high prep GM for a while. Yeah. And I enjoy doing all of that writing in and of itself, even if it doesn't get used, or more likely gets used in different games later. Yeah, that's totally fair, Tempest. That's absolutely fair. The ways that I focus my prep, at least in my side games, my prep for Sablewood was a bit different than I do for like a normal home game. But that's because all of the environments were already there for me. I think that was more similar to how I prep if I was like running Curse of Strahd or something. It was kind of how I prepped for Sablewood Messengers. But the if I'm running for like my home game, I put most of my time into like world building. And so I'm almost never thinking about mechanical stuff. I put maybe 10% of the time into like constructing combats and things like that. But just want to mention, I have nothing big currently to add, but I really enjoy listening to the convo right now. Oh, thank you, Ink Charm. I appreciate it. Well, with that, let's take a look. Let's take a look. I don't know why. I know why that's there. I do not know why Walmart Business is there. I have not gone to Walmart Business. Oh, it's an ad. I was like, why is that in the fucking thing? I don't even use this browser, by the way. This is a different profile of Opera GX that I only use for on stream. Let's see, Demiplane. Sablewood felt pretty safe to start out with, but I still felt like I need to add a bunch of details of my own in order to feel like I own the setting, which makes me more comfortable improvising. I absolutely get that. Yeah. I got nothing but agreement there. Yeah. Okay. Playtest. I found the changelog at one point. Is this it? Oh, I just need to scroll down a little bit. Okay, let's take a look at this. Zoom it in a little bit so that folks can see. There we go. That's better. Universal changes. Damage thresholds. Adjusting damage thresholds across all classes. Fair. Stress points are no longer marked when you take damage below your minor threshold. Interesting. This simplifies the armor threshold HP decision process during combat. You know what? This isn't something I identified when I was thinking about, the complexity aspect, but this is exactly the sort of thing I'm looking for. When I talk about, like, how do we reduce the complexity? How do we reduce the player responsibility? Taking things that maybe don't matter or don't add much and simplifying them out. Adjust the damage thresholds to compensate and just take this kind of extra factor to everything and just get rid of it. Interesting. I'll have to think about the implications of less stress from combat, but I actually think overall I'm down with that because there were enough things that did stress there, and I think that stress being something you absolutely can get in combat and something that you can, spend to do your stuff is very fair, but also having it be, in terms of consequences, primarily a social or an environmental consequence. In the same way that you could take damage during environmental or social interactions, but you're primarily going to take stress. I think there's a good corollary there of, like, you could take stress during combat, but you'll primarily be taking damage and HP. And removing this as a source that you could get stress from, I think goes more towards that. Overall, I like that. I like a simplification. That's exactly what I'm looking for. GM moves and fear. Changed GM role structure so you can now choose to make a move or take fear on rolls with fear, not both. Okay. This reduces the fear economy and impacts the balance of how much fear is spent on adversary moves. Also streamlined what you can spend fear on, taking weight off of GM's side of play. Fucking awesome. Okay. Yeah. This is it. Yes. Perfect. This is exactly the sort of shit I'm looking for. Reducing the fear economy with how much I like fear. I don't know. Cuz I'm trying to think about Yeah, I'll have to keep thinking about that. But in terms of fear economy, of, like, does it feel like you have too little fear, too few fear? This is definitely, like, this is reducing the amount of fear you'll get, period. Because this is, to my remembrance, rolling fear is the only way that GMs can gain fear. So GMs are just going to be moving a lot less and or doing less cool things. But maybe that's okay. Maybe that's okay. I'll have to think about it a lot more, and I think it'll depend a lot. But I think that is something that I'll have to play test to see how it feels. In theory, in principle, I like a lot of this. I especially like streamlining what you can spend fear on. That's exactly what I wanted. Couldn't have said it better. Or I could, if it, just in time for the 1.3 stuff. Knew you would like the new fear economy stuff. Yeah. I'm definitely a fan. Yeah. It does slightly incentivize the GM to ask for more rolls relative to the advice to not do that as much in D&D 5e. Yeah, a bit. Yeah, that is something where, like, I can see a distinct downside to this, but I'm not sure if that downside is real or not, and I'll have to play test to see. But in theory, big positive for me. I'll have to review the actual streamlining, but big positive so far. Stress points. The starting number of stress points slot for all players is now 6. What was it before? Was it like 5? So there's more stress, I think. Am I correct about that? I could be wrong. So I think that's an increase. Okay, sure. If that's feedback that they got, I believe it. Yeah, interesting. I did not run into before it could vary by class. Really? Oh, I didn't notice that. I honestly did not perceive there being stress being an issue. Really. Just like straight up. To be fair, my players rolled pretty fucking high. They were succeeding a lot. And so I think that there were less potential for me to give them stress outside of the combat. So, you know, it'll probably take that one with a grain of salt. Because, yeah, I really did not perceive stress being even remotely an issue. But I'm assuming if they made this sort of change, that they probably got a lot of feedback that, hey, I'm taking too much stress. I need more slots. I forget, did they mention anything about wanting to have consequences for fear of failure in mind before calling for a roll? I mean, in Sablewood, they have some like recommendations for that sort of thing. I think in general, though, like outside of their recommendations, because I can't remember them recommending anything specifically about that sponge. But I think in general, that's probably a question of how comfortable you feel with your improv, because that's absolutely something you could prep out. But if you feel comfortable that you could successfully improv those sorts of things consistently, then I don't think there's a huge reason to have them in mind ahead of time. Use an action. Added use an action phrase to moves that require a token to be added to the action tracker during combat, even if they don't require an action roll to use. Good clarification. You know, I didn't think about that, but that's a good clarification. Renamed book divisions to chapters instead of parts. Split some content from chapters 3 and 4 into chapter 5, and the former chapter 5 with currently unwritten content has become chapter 6. Sure, all right. What was 3 and 4? Split some content from chapters 3 and 4 into new chapter 5. What is new chapter 5? I'm curious. Because I remember really kind of complaining about the organization. What is chapter 5? What? Okay, wait. Library, playtest, view source. Just gonna zoom out on this a little bit. Oh, it doesn't say. Is this? Look, if you're gonna. Okay, so this is chapter 3. So running an adventure is chapter 3. Not running. That's chapter 4. Is creating your world chapter 5, I'm guessing? Interesting. That is not the thing that I thought needed to be split out, but that's all right. That's fine. I don't have huge beef with that. There's a general list of consequences from less to more severe, and also small tables of suggested hope and fear events for some locations. Oh, that's cool. Hell yeah. I think the stress change may be for the sake of numbers being easier to remember. 6 stress, 6 HP, 6 hope. That's not bad, yeah. On the other hand, they are not beating the Satanism accusation this way. You know, I didn't think about that. That's kind of fucking hilarious. Is it 6 hope now? I thought it was 5 max hope. Is it 6 max hope? That's hilarious if that is the case. Oh my gosh. But that is easier to remember. Oh man. Let's see. Introduction. Art of the game. Added section, rulings over rules. About focusing on narrative rulings instead of the letter of the law. Okay, sure. Moved lines, veils, X-card, and open door policy from a table for all to chapter 3's session 0 and safety tools. I think that's very fair. I think that's a good reorganization. Preparing for adventure. Class, ancestry, and community features. Reworded many features. Hell yeah. The only changes itemized below are those that change not only the wording, but the intended effect. I want to go and check. If we're talking about rewording for rules, there was one card that I remember that I was legitimately like, I don't know what this means. Like, this means two very different things depending on how I interpret it. I think it was a midnight card. Let's see. Make a spellcast roll. Currently vulnerable. I would still have some like bolding there. I would have bolding on or italicization on anything that is a keyword. Enemies very close to you. This is exactly it. Like, okay, this is one of the things where it's like rewording for clarity. And I know they've said they, haven't had an editor go by this. Maybe they need to do that sooner rather than later. But strike enemies very close to you versus all enemies within very close range. Intuitively, I'm like, those must be the same thing. If those aren't the same thing, that's insane if they aren't the same thing. But also, if they're the same thing, they should say the same thing. Like, especially, it's one thing for maybe the rule book, the playtest book to be written maybe in more like natural language-esque. But like for like ability cards, like literally like, like magic trading card game type ability cards, you should absolutely have the language be very consistent. So I was really wondering if when they're talking about rewording features, but I guess not. I think it's 5 hope, but they have 6 armor slots now, so we're still dancing with the devil. Fuck yeah. I'm slightly behind catching up, but you can change 2 move tokens into a fear, so there's a second way to get fear if the players just won't roll it. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Which, again, going back to my, pros, cons, I love fear, but that is another kind of layer of decision making for the GM of like, what do I use this resource for? Do I use it to activate the adversaries? Do I get more fear? Again, tons of flexibility, huge highs that you could hit there, but there's just so many layers of complexity to it. When you gain 6 stress and 6 hope and mark 6 HP slot, you summon the devil. It is 6 hope, was 5 before. I guess I kind of spoiled it. No worries. No worries about spoilers on this one. It's not like a story. I do like generally want to go in blind, but not nearly as much of a thing for this. I definitely read that as the same thing. I guess just a lack of editing for consistency. That's exactly what I'm saying, Tipinist. I think it's the same thing. It'd be insane if it wasn't. But, man, maybe for 1.4, have an editor go over it, I think having too much fear might be a thing with longer play because unused actions turn into fear and fear carries over. That's fair. That is fair. So for longer play sessions, you're gonna have GMs typically starting out with a decent pool of fear. And then across the game, they need to decide if they're taking that fear or if they're doing a turn. What happens if you roll fear on a skill check? Wait, going back to this. So change the GM role structure to where you can now choose to take a move or take fear. So when they say make a move, what does that mean for non-combat? Because I understand what that means in combat. But in, like, outside of combat, outside of, let's say, the action tracker, right? GM moves aren't, like, as much of an explicit thing. It's more just, like, generalized consequences for their roles. So what does this mean that you're like not supposed to like give them consequences? I don't know that I necessarily understand that outside of the context of combat. Interesting. Huh. Consistent uniform language and phrasing is so important. Yeah. Like, and it's, it's a playtest, it's a beta, we're in early access, so I'm not gonna be like, man, the game fucking sucks. But you gotta get to it eventually. Gotta get to it. 6 max fear pool, 2, I believe. I thought it was 10, Tom Duffy. Did they lower it? Oh my goodness. I found it helpful to open the old playtest document while reading this so I could directly compare old new features. I might. If there's something I'm extra confused on, I might go and find the old document because I still have it on my system. Yeah. You can either make something happen right away or save fear for later. Interesting. So, like, if they succeed with fear... Because, like, okay. This was... And this might be that I was misunderstanding something, but this is my understanding and why I'm a little confused. My understanding of, like, the degrees of success, right, were failure with fear, failure with hope, success with fear, and success with hope. My understanding was that for success with fear, they got what they wanted. They succeed. Like, PC gets what they want, and GM +1 fear. But then on failure, so like, I don't understand what that would I don't understand how that fear would, how that change would affect anything there. And then with failure with fear, my understanding was that there would be consequences. Oh my God, you cannot read that at all. And GM gains +1 fear. So and so on this one, am I just supposed to choose one or the other? Like, am I supposed to choose, like, the consequences or the fear on a failure with fear? Because, again, this makes total sense in combat. In combat, it's like anytime they roll with fear. If they roll a success with fear, then that would be a GM move. And then this is for, like, out of combat, my understanding of it. So I don't know exactly how this applies. Success with fear means a complication occurs or the GM takes +1 fear. Whereas before it was both. Interesting. So success with fear used to be an and here and complication. But now these are grouped together and it is an or. So these are grouped together, but you choose one. So on a success with fear, the PC gets what they want, and the GM either gets a fear or there's a complication. And on this, there are always consequences. And then the consequences are either GM gains +1 fear or consequences are extra bad? Extra bad? Is that how we're interpreting this? Because that kind of makes sense to me. That's a success with fear, so you get what you want, but it comes at a cost. Work together to describe the PC's success and introduce the complication or cost. Maybe they face an attack or gain stress from an enemy. Get new information. Yeah, okay. I'm only 2 minutes behind now. They definitely imply that you can make a GM move outside of combat to make bigger, more impactful moves. There are no specific examples. Yeah, I agree, Daniel, that ambushes I'm not generally a fan of. I think they work in certain circumstances, but I'm skeptical of them overall. Yeah, it's a bit weird to think about because outside of combat, GM moves are generally free. That's kind of where I'm thinking about this, but if you kind of like sub out thinking about GM moves for like these extra complications or like an extra bad layer to it, I feel like there's quite a lot of guidance on types of GM moves. I think in combat there this, but maybe there's more for outside of combat. Generally, I think the idea now is taking fear is like banking your GM move or consequence for another point in the story, regardless of if the players roll with fear or not. Yeah, I feel like now it is essentially they fail, and then you either have an extra thing that happens, or you take that extra thing and you solidify it into a token. Same thing with like the success. And you know what? Maybe that is overall more intuitive. So now it's kind of like, okay, let me think about this a little bit more. So now it's kind of failure with fear, failure with hope, success with fear, success with hope. On the success side of things, the PC gets what they want. The PC does not get what they want. Right? And then we kind of have another delineation of PC plus 1 hope. PC plus 1 hope, PC plus 1 hope. So that's how both of those go down. And then for these two, you either give an in the moment complication or plus 1 fear. You know, the more I look at that and the more I think about that, I actually think the more I like it. Because I think that's really slick. I think that's kind of intuitive to teach new players. Right? This is actually kind of a bit of even kind of a simplified thing. And the more I think about this, if I'm thinking about it right, the more I'm thinking about this is essentially, right, there's either failure or success. This is the classic DC dichotomy over here. Like, this is like the D&D, you set a difficulty class, this is the dichotomy. This is the binary. And then if they do it with hope, hooray, you get plus 1 hope, and we're basically, just still solidly in DC. If you roll with fear, you either get an in-the-moment complication, but one of the problems is, and this is something that I struggle with all the time in Blades, that is just sort of part of the system, is sometimes in-the-moment complications are hard. Like, sometimes it is difficult to come up with a complication because you just can't think of one that makes sense. So now, if they roll with fear, it is either you give them an in-the-moment complication that makes sense, or you bank fear for use later when another complication might be more interesting. Okay, you know what? I think I'm down with it. If I'm understanding everything correctly. Let's read some chats. Zenshi, as my understanding, do something now or later by banking fear to use later. Yeah. Confirmed that the gym can only have a max of 6 fear now. Holy shit, that's way lower. But I guess now you're getting less fear, so you don't need as big of a bank. An ambush isn't terrible if it's pre-planned and there's an in-world reason. It's just doing an ambush because of a bad roll I find terrible. Oh yeah, that's very fair. Yeah. We recommend you only choose to take a fear when you can't think of a GM move in the situation. Okay, you know what? I'm down with this. I think that's a little bit more slick, a little bit more elegant. I think it's a little bit more intuitive, especially if you're like a newer GM, of essentially You have the complication now, or you solidify that complication. You take it, you put it into a fucking hydraulic press channel, and they smush it down into a fear token, and you can use the fear token later. I think I have a little bit of like internal resistance to this because of how much I like fear. And, you know, I have a little bit of internal resistance because I'm like, no, they're taking away my fear economy. I'm going to get less fear. Oh, no. But this overall simplifies the GM experience, which was my big con. And while I still think maintaining a lot of the things that are good about fear. So I'm down with it. I'm down with that. That is a good thing. It was a bit, I was a bit turned off with success with fear, not getting a complication. A little too meta for my taste. Yeah. I always read success with fear as including a complication. I also kind of read that as it depended though. I think it was a little bit unclear. Like we had, and I won't go back to like that 1.2 like relitigation, but we had a long conversation about the degrees of success in this and like what exactly they meant. I think that this makes way more sense. This is very much just there are two axes. There are whether or not you succeed and basically whether or not there's a complication or not. And then separate from that, the GM has the choice to bank the complication for later. There's like three things to think about. I like that. Man, even me talking about how like I wanted them to simplify the degrees of success. This is a great way to do that. It's going good so far. It's going good so far. They encourage you to have some kind of complication. They only say to not accidentally undermine the success. Yeah. I don't really get people saying this is hard because all these guidelines really help me come up with improv because I have a general idea to start from. Might not be good improv, but at least it's something. I mean, I haven't seen what other people say because I don't generally watch TTRPG content in my free time. But I will say, I don't necessarily think it was hard, but it was complicated. There was a lot to remember, a lot of balls to juggle. And that's what I was less into. I definitely punted and just took fear far more than I wish I did. But they give you that explicit escape hatch. Yeah. Or just giving out stress, which can also feel like a bit of a cop-out, but it can certainly make sense in the narrative sometimes. Yeah. I forgot there was an explicit option. I forgot that was an explicit option and never used it, but yes, there's also an escape hatch they specifically lay out. Yeah. Hey, Mercy, thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. Some people have said that they feel forced as GMs to come up with new stuff happens on every roll, either for hope or fear factor, which they apparently disliked. Are you a bot, Mercy? Because that sounds like a bot. Some people have said that they feel I think that like the forced to come up with new stuff happens is that is a generalized complaint of the concept of failing forward, which is a very common advice point within D&D even. How you know you made it, you get those bots, yeah. Do I have a chance with you? Alrighty, let me see. Do I even have Twitch dashboard opened up? Goodbye, Mercy Capita. Mercy Capita, if you are not a bot, I'm sorry. Don't come on so strong. Goodbye. Block. Oh, wait, no, that just blocked them. I don't even know if I banned them necessarily. I do not know how to do anything in Twitch, dude. I don't know. We'll see if blocking worked. But yeah, so the new stuff happens. Failing forward, very common advice point within D&D. And I have heard a very similar complaint, Timpanist, of, yeah, having to come up with something happens every time is tough. Like, I think it's generally good. I think it's generally right. And it's generally better for your story, but sometimes it's difficult. And that's why I'm liking this more and more the more I think about it, of it is still encouraging you to do that. It's still encouraging the fail forward, the success with complications, the degrees of success. But and they're building that into the fabric of the system, which, as I said at the beginning, I think is super important. If you have it off as a side rule like D&D, I think that it is inevitably going to be worse. I think it's inevitably not going to feel nearly as good. But Blades in the Dark, you don't have an option to not give a complication. You have to think about the new stuff happens with every single roll in Blades. This is a good option for if you literally can't think of anything besides how they fail. If you cannot think about this, if you cannot think up this complication, then you get to Bank of Fear. The more I think about it, the more I like it. That's pretty slick. Yeah. It kind of addresses both sides of the dichotomy. Yeah. To me, it's more like, of course, I gotta say something. At least now I have some guidelines. Yeah, true. I mean, that's very fair, Timpanus. And that's why people like degrees of success. Is it gives them very distinct guidelines for how to go about that sort of narration. Yeah. So many times would I type what Mega is saying as he's saying it. Look. I think there's a bit of a hive mind. To be fair, it would be even worse if they're not a bot. Yeah, true. Are you going to listen to a CR video explaining the changes? Probably not. Maybe. Not this stream. Maybe. At some other stream. Potentially. But not this stream. Maybe, though. What some people need to realize is something happens does not have to be huge or anything. It just means to respect the time the player took to roll something or don't ask for a roll. I fully agree. But I think that even to that end, there is an extra layer of something on the DM. That means that, you have to, when let's disregard degrees of success. Let's disregard something new happens, what have you. The player saying, I want to do this, and then the GM thinking about that and setting a DC and coming up with success and failure. That's very easy. It takes a lot of stress off of the GM to allow them to think about other stuff, to be planning other stuff, to be moving other stuff in the background. And so I understand if you're a GM that does a lot of that, or just finds, maybe some parts of GMing a little bit overwhelming, that even coming up with something small that is not directly related to what the player said, like success and failure, very directly okay, the player's giving me something to base that on. I think a lot of times with degrees of success, introducing complications, the GM has to, a lot of times, improv that, even if it's small. Now, that all said, that's me trying to, put myself in their shoes, play devil's advocate. I love introducing complications. I love that sort of thing within my games. I love degrees of success in D&D as opposed to not having it. So I'm big into this, and I'm big into failing forward. But when people talk about that, I get it to a degree. Either cannot think of or a consequence would interrupt a nicely flowing conversation. Also true, Timpanist, yeah. Because I think it confused me if I needed to take fear and spend it to perform the consequence before, or if the consequence was separate. Yeah, I like this a lot. I like this or a lot. Yeah. The only type of role that I find it hard to play both sides of is something like investigation. Failure often is just nothing happens. Yeah, absolutely. That is very true. And I think that this is a really nice, like you kind of called it, escape hatch from that of, yeah, if they're doing perception or investigation and you don't want to do the whole like make up something fake that they didn't actually see, and then they have to like not meta game that. Like, you know, there are options theoretically there, but if you don't want to mess with all that, you can just take a fear. You can just say nothing happens, +1 fear. See you later. I guess you could try to make sure that you find something at DC 0 and find more with higher DCs. Sometimes, but sometimes there's literally nothing to find, like you said. Yeah. Grace Mercer has some wonderful lines for badly failed investigations. Them some bones. Them some bones. That's definitely a dead body. That body's dead as a doornail. Zero doubt in your mind. Don't have them investigate if there's nothing to find, IMO. Sorry, Zenji, to clarify. If there is exactly one thing to find. If there's exactly one thing to perceive or to find through investigation, and they fail, you know, you can't have them only find part of it. If there's exactly one, you know, if you've subdivided it as small as you can. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, preparing for an adventure. Right, true, yeah, I feel you. Modified, okay. Modified the rally class feature? Oh, really? I would love to see the modified rally feature, because I was honestly interested in playing a bard. Grace and Codex seemed cool, but I was not into rally. Once per session, when the GM brings the action tracker into play, describe how you rally the party as they head into the fray. Then give yourself and all allies a d6 rally die. Okay? Anyone can spend this rally die to roll it, adding the result to an action roll, reaction, or clearing stress. At the end of the session, all unspent rally dice are cleared. Oh! Okay. That's very straightforward. You know, I like this more than the old feature. I don't know that I love it, but it's very simple. It's very straightforward. Not everything has to be super complicated. Like, all right, interesting. Yeah, I think overall, solid ups. I don't know that. I feel like there's something maybe more interesting to do with it, but if that's where they kept it, I wouldn't be mad. Might be rally is similar to the old one, just now countdown die. Nah, there was a lot more complication to it. It wasn't just there was like a countdown die, and then there was, if you go over the countdown die, something happens, but if you're certain degrees away from completing it, then you get stuff at the end. It was, the old rally was, I didn't think, very good and also very complicated. So it really steered me away from Bard, honestly. It does mean a player has less to keep track of, but I do miss the interplay with fear. Yeah, there was some interplay with fear, wasn't there? Yeah. I think there's maybe more that could be done with it, but I like this more than the old one. I remember thinking, not too fiddly, don't want to keep track of that. Yeah. It's nice to have a counterweight that swings into action if a lot of people roll badly. Yeah, I can see the devs trying so hard not to reinvent D&D. Yeah. Yup. See the no initiative hate? Yeah. Yeah. I also very much see that. I like it even when we were going through it, it was so easy to just be like, oh, that's like in D&D. And I can see every time someone says that, the devs just fucking cringing. Yeah. Yeah. I forgot you basically had to bank stuff if your rally never triggered. Now that always triggers, they don't need that. Yeah, essentially, Daniel. Yeah. Modified Unstoppable. Okay. Modified Companion Sheet and Ranger. Sure. Modified Hide. Oh. Spellcast trait for both is Finesse. How did they modify Hide? I remember thinking that Hide seemed powerful. I remember thinking it seemed very, very powerful. So how did they modify it? I'm curious. While you're out of sight from all your foes, you can mark a stress as usual to become hidden, giving you disadvantage against all rolls against you. As a rogue, when you are hidden, targets also can't see you. Even if they move into line of sight, you are no longer hidden after you move or attack, but when you leave hidden to make an attack, the roll has advantage. Okay. This seems more reasonable. Because before, hide was just all auto magic, and it was like, damn. Yeah, hide definitely got nerfed, yeah. Daggerheart does have more swingy problems. Bad rolls give GM more power, which makes things go worse for the player, and same the other way. It does. I don't disagree. I think that is potentially feature not bug scenario, but I'll have to, I will need to play it more to really feel out how pervasive it is. But I do think that is feature not bug. I think they want it to feel that way. Especially, I mean, they even talked about, like, the reason that GMs roll a d20 is because they want the GM roll to feel swingy specifically. So, yeah. The changes to hide are subtle. If you don't see it, I can point out the difference. In practice, I don't see the swingy as a problem, but my sample size is very small. Yeah, I agree. Swinginess comes with any game that involves die rolls. It does. But there is more, like, when I think we're talking about the swinginess of Daggerheart, the aspect of the players roll bad, which is already going to be bad for them, right? That already introduces badness. You know, like, if you fail with fear, something bad happens, and you essentially power up the DM for later. However, I will say, I think that the degrees of success change. Oh, ad incoming? Ad incoming! I think that the degrees of success changes actually mitigate a lot of the swinginess. Because it used to be, like, right, if you failed with fear, it was, you fail, there's a complication, and the DM gets a power-up for later. Whereas now, it is, you fail, and either there's a complication now, or you can essentially think about it as a complication later. Basically, there's a complication. Whereas now, succeeding with hope, the other side of that spectrum, is you succeed and you gain the hope. So I think, actually, it used to be a little bit DM-weighted on, like, bad rolls could kind of beget bad rolls. But now, I think they've leveled it out a lot. So anyways, ad time. I will see you guys all in a second. Goodbye. scene. I mean, I guess this scene theoretically works. There we go. We're back. Oh, and that's perfect because of the different sound sources. The music still plays, but it just goes down. Sick. All right. All right. I will also say, I have a soft out at 3 p.m., which is about 2 hours away for me right now. I'm just gonna highlight this. This is where were we? We were in the rogue class. So let's see how much more. Ooh, there's a decent amount more. I mean, I'm not gonna look at everything, but interesting. Okay. Let's see. Megan coming back to us having a whole ass conversation in the break time. I know. I'm not even gonna read it. I'm not even gonna try to understand. You guys feel free to keep having your talk. Those were some really nice chill tunes. Good vibes. Thank you. I mentioned it earlier, but I found a bunch of really good music, and I made like a groovin' playlist. This one is literally called Wholesome. Aw. But anyways, Seraph. Modified the prayer dice class feature. Okay. Sorcerer modified the channel raw power class feature. Okay. I will also say, in regards to, having a soft out, I'm not going to look at every single thing, only the things that seem pretty impactful or like I'm really interested in, like the rally feature. If we get to the end and there's something that you really want to see me talk about and I skipped over it, feel free to let me know. There needs to be an item in Daggerheart called the Bag o' Hearts. Bag o' Hearts. Modified the battle strategist and combat training class features and added the attack of opportunity class feature. That's funny. Swapping guards in combat now uses an action. Oh, that makes sense. Okay. Loadout and vault. Clarify that the recall cost is paid for the card in your vault, not your loadout. I had a question on that. I remember during my my thing. Makes total sense. You yeah. Absolutely makes sense. Modified the demon, dracona, fairy, fawn, fungrel. No. Okay. They're few enough that I'm just going to go and look at all of them because modifying the fungrel one makes me scared. Let's see. Okay. Damon. Let's see. Fearless. When you roll with fear, you can mark 2 stress to make it a roll with hope instead. Interesting. You have advantage on... Okay, so I think that's just a straight buff. If I remember correctly. Some of the ancestry features are big. Fungrel in particular. No! People are sad about Fungrel. I'm already pre-sad about Fungrel. I loved Fungrel's feature. Why'd they touch it? But the Fungrel thing is in their lore. Ugh. I gave him both features. F it. Hell yeah. Let's see. Dracona. Choose one of these. Spend a hope to make an instinct roll using a breath. This seems... Oh, using your proficiency. This seems pretty minor. Same general vibes. Fairy. I did have a problem with Fairy's flight. Mark stress to take flight for a number of minutes equal to your level while flying. Your evasion score increases by 1. I think it's a solid change. I think it's less cool than like, oh, you fly until you roll with fear. But making it tied to like when you roll with fear. I said this about, I think there was like 2 or 3 features that had this feature where you got to do it until you roll with fear. And I was like, that is going to de-incentivize risk-taking, drama, rolling in general. So I'm happy to see them going towards this sort of thing. You know, a number of minutes equal to your level, whatever. Like, you know, I'm famously not a huge fan of measuring things by like minutes, time, whatever. But I think it's much better than measuring by like rolling with fear. Enabling communication with Fungril over long distances. Yeah, Timpanus, but that, I mean, the lore can depend on the setting. If you don't mechanicize it, you don't guarantee that it's there. I really think the Ancestries ought to have 2 features. I don't mind it if they only have 1, as long as the 1 is impactful. I think Fungril are better this way. The feature they had before was highly situational, but it was so cool. I haven't seen the new one, so let's see. Fawn. You can easily leap up to close range across gaps or chasms. Okay. Kick. On a successful melee attack, you can mark a stress to kick yourself off the target. Oh. These are way cooler. I like the Fawn change a lot. Fungril. Let's see. You can draw the last life essence from the recently deceased when you are within very close range of a creature who marks their last hit point and dies. Spend 2 hope and describe what death ritual you perform to clear 1 of your HP. Sure. You know what? If you give them both, I think the other one was free maybe, or maybe it cost a stress. If it didn't cost a stress last time, I think you pop both of them on Fungril and they're still fine. You know, even if you want to bump this up to 3 hope, I don't know. I think you could give them both, you know, wiggle the numbers around. This is more consistently useful. I don't disagree with G. Hercub. But I think it is far less interesting. Unfortunately. About an hour and a half back, but curious to see what got nerfed and buffed, and if we will be comparing OG Daggerheart to each other. Some. The lore suggests it's not all Fungril, and Raw, the PC versions never have it, but it's an obvious DM choice there. Yeah, true. But flavor should be flavor, not the only thing going for them mechanically. To a degree, I think that you could have made the Fungril one a little bit less flavorful. Like, I think that there's a way to... Because, like, I didn't see anyone complaining. Well, I say I didn't see anyone in my chat, because that's the only people I see talking about it. But, like, from my recollection, I don't remember anyone in chat complaining about Syndicate Rogue. Right, because Syndicate Rogue has a very similar thing, or at least they used to, with this. I think this is cool. I think most people thought this was cool. And you absolutely could have made the Fungril feature a little bit more like this, to give it a little bit more mechanical relevance. But, you don't need to, I suppose. I'm just sad because I liked them so much. Let's see. In systems like D&D, the general rule is raw is only what is explicitly stated. Daggerheart being more narrative, it's unclear if the same general thing will hold. I mean, that's true, but I also think, in general, for a game where, and for a hobby, where homebrew worlds are so prevalent, and with, like, Daggerheart not having, like, an explicit, like, entire default setting, just a lot of little, like, mini default, like, sections for setting. If you don't mechanicize something, it will get left out of a lot of homebrew worlds. I at least that's what I've seen in D&D. Add prof to your armor score. If you decide not to wear armor, your shell is your active armor and has an armor score equal to your prof. That's cool. I like that. I think it's pretty similar to what it was before. When you fail a roll that utilized one of your experiences, you can mark a stress to re-roll. You must take the new result. I think that's a little bit, maybe a small nerf, but before you make an agility roll, that's not too different. At character creation, every time you level up, raise either your major or severe damage threshold by 1. That is different. I do remember thinking that orcs seemed very strong. And this seems both interesting and a little bit more reasonable, honestly. Ribbit, did they give me something I actually want to play? You can breathe and move underwater just as easily as on land, sure. You can use your long tongue to grab onto things close to you. You can also mark a stress to unleash it as a finesse close weapon that does D12. Did they just up the damage die? Is that the only thing that was changed? I'm still not interested. He's so cute, but I don't care. Like, especially with all of the weapons being so interesting and cool, the only thing I see here is underwater, and that is so campaign dependent. Even arc dependent, really. So I don't know about Ribbit. Syndicate Rogue is cool. The only thing that sucks about the other Rogue subclass is also really strong. Yeah, true. I wonder if they're going to add their version of Ganassi and Aarakocra. Potentially, especially since they already established, like, on default flying races. Potentially. I conceptually like the unarmored thing, but I've never liked them mechanically in any system. It's usually mathematically weaker, and the money savings is insignificant. I think now that you have to spend downtime actions to repair, there's more room for it in this setting. I really like the armor. I don't know if it's essentially balanced at the moment, but I think that the bones of the armor system in this is significantly better than, like, D&D, and I think does allow for some, like, balancing room for things like unarmored defense. I will only say, though, some of the light armor that you could get gave you active buffs. So it's like, why would I not just take those? You know what I'm saying? I think it's like leather, probably. Yeah, leather armor. Let's see. No, just had a base score. Okay, maybe it didn't, actually. Maybe it didn't. So, I mean, there's something there. There is this, like, featherborn. Oh, no, that's a consumable. Yeah, so maybe there's still room for some unarmored for stuff like this. Although, you still have to prepare it. I don't know. I don't know that it has a distinct, like, real reason yet, but I think that there's room within the bones of the system to make it feel right still. Have you considered that Ribbit is so cute? I have considered it. I noticed most of the changes are swapping hope for stress and vice versa, like Human and Katari. Yeah. I think they're going to be playing around with hope and stress a lot, because hope being, I mean, the way that I've been thinking about it, and I think a decent way to abstract it, of, like, hope being combo, you know, in, like, a fighting game, and stress essentially being, like, blood magic. I think they're going to be swapping those around a lot every update, probably, as they continue to balance the game, because those are very different conceptually, even though they might seem interchangeable. It's like, oh, they're both a resource that you have, but they're a very different type of resource, and so getting the feel right will be tricky. One of the characters I built was a Ribbit Rogue who used his tongue to steal things. The weapon was last resort in my mind. I want the grabber tongue. My problem with the grabber tongue is that it's so visible. Like, sure, you know, I guess it's nice that, like, you can reach over a counter, but I don't know. I see that being very visible and not explicitly and nichely useful. That is true. Not having to repair your armor makes it at least worth looking at mathematically. Yeah, I vaguely remember that some very early playtesters mentioned they played Ganassi-like characters, but I could be remembering wrong. Yeah. No tier 0 armor now gives you buffs. The lightest tier 0 armor did used to give a buff. Ah, that's what I was remembering. Okay. I haven't looked at the higher tier anymore just because of time. I mean, I think that the lowest tier armor not giving a buff and basically just every tier up from that, give like every like heavier armor just giving detriments. I think that's a totally fair way to go. And it makes unarmored potentially, you know, doable. Oh, lots of updates to the community. Oh, wait, we can just look at it here. Okay. Highborn. No, we can't. We can't look at it here. Okay, never mind. Let's see. Game rules. Communities. Now I want Ribbit that skinned as a chameleon with modest hide buff instead of water breathing. That'd be fun. That'd be very fun. Dracona makes a pretty solid stand-in for Ganassi type character. Yeah, to a degree. I mean, it's, yeah, elementally kind of based. Yeah. So one thing I'm worried about, I didn't dislike any of the communities. I thought all the communities were pretty fine. There were some that I liked more than others preferentially, but none that I was like, ooh, this needs to get changed. So I'm a little worried about that, honestly. Highborn, you have advantage on rolls you make to consort with nobles, negotiate prices, or leverage your reputation to get what you want. I think they just nerfed Highborn. Okay. Let's see. Ridgeborn. Did I miss it? There we go. You have advantage on rolls to traverse dangerous cliffs and ledges, navigate harsh environments, and use your survival knowledge. Additionally, raise your severe damage threshold by 2. Okay. That's just a little bit of a buff. I think. Vonderborn. At the beginning of a session, randomly choose a different community card? Yo! That is cool and interesting. I honestly wonder if that might be too strong. Oh no, it's randomly choose. Randomly choose. Oh, I want to play a Wanderborn so bad. Look, I'm not normally into like random whatever, but that's so cool. And I think it makes sense for Wanderborn. I thought that you know what? I forgot. I did think that the Wanderborn was kind of weak in the previous one. I like Wanderborn. I think that's a good change. Ridgeborn orcs will be beefy as heck. Yeah, honestly. Yeah. Wanderborn is weird. Yeah, but it's weird in a weird, fun way. I played a Ridgeborn Giant Sorcerer last night, mostly for character background, but turned out nicely less squishy than they might have been. Nice. Oh, yeah, true, for a sorcerer, yeah. It does lead to weird situations. You could talk to nobles just fine yesterday. What happened? I think that you can build it into, like, very, you know, like, you are, like, very good in very specific situations. You know, you've had this wide breadth of knowledge and experiences, but that does leave you a little bit lacking in depth. So I think that there's a narrative way to spin that of like, well, I'm good with introductions, but not with not with the deeper conversations, you know? I think there's a way to spin that for Wanderborn, to where it's fun and cool. But I do agree, if you're sticking around the same area and talking to the same people, you will have to do some narrative load building or you will have to take on some narrative load to try and make that make sense. But I still like it. Being able to choose what makes makes more sense lore-wise, but may have been too strong. Yeah. Maybe you could make it to where like you choose a different community, you spend, I don't know, like a stress to change it or something, you know? I think there's something there. I'm a bit surprised you like this. My impression is that you're anti-randomness in most cases. I am. I'm also kind of a bit surprised that I like this. I think it's because it's not randomness in the moment. If I'm trying to self-analyze. Because, like, I don't like Wild Magic Sorcerer. I don't like Wild Magic Barbarian. But this is like the random thing happens, and it's just switching out buffs. And it is not related to anything I would want to do. It's not like I have to be worried that if I do this thing I want to do, I'm going to accidentally trigger the random thing. Like, that's the type of randomness I don't like. But this is just very like at the beginning of every session, you just do it, and then you're there for the entire session. I do like. I think I like that. Yeah. Randomness is fine if you choose to embrace the random. I love Wild Magic Sorcerer being an option. If every class had random elements, I'd be annoyed. Oh, I want to be very clear. I'm not against Wild Magic Sorcerer at all. I think they're cool and fine for other people. And when Wild Magic Barbarian came out, I was like, that's a cool subclass that I will never play. But no. So yeah, no. The random class is totally cool, totally chill, just not for me. How about a stress to keep the community, aka fake it till you make it? Ooh, that's cool, Eddie. That could be really cool. I like that a lot. Yeah, so it's like at the beginning of the session, you randomly choose a different one unless you pay a stress. I like that a lot, Eddie. That's cool. Yeah. Spending a number of stress to change your community would be cool. I also like that option. The precise cost can change, but the general idea, yeah. So for a homebrew changeling, how much stress to change your ancestry? Oh, I kind of agree, Timpanist. That would be cool. Ooh. Anyways, we're getting off topic here. We're getting off topic. But those are some cool ideas. Anyways, experiences, expanded list of suggestions. Neat. Playing an adventure. On your turn. Moves are now considered actions if they require an action roll or state that they're actions, and they require placing a token in the action tracker. This mirrors the updated adversary rules. Okay, nice. Do they normally get racial abilities? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. They do not, Daniel. But it could be cool if they did. Like, especially for some that it makes sense, like the daemon, or like the ribbit having, the tongue or whatever. Waiting for May to start ranting about crits having become more likely due to advantage changes. Uh-oh. Let's see. I kind of like the Daggerheart version getting their abilities if the cost is appropriate. Yeah, I agree. Maybe a whole hit point. Ooh, a whole hit point could work, yeah. Anyways, advantage and disadvantage. Change advantage system to make crits and rolls with hope more likely. Gut reaction. Advantage now gives the PC an additional hope die. Not a d6 they rolled, then choose which to use. Disadvantage now has them roll an additional hope die, not a d6, and take the lowest option. Okay. Two things. I will be interested to see if this mentality is consistent, because I did point out that the concept of the concept of changing the size of your hope die, or your like some abilities were like, oh, change your hope die from a d12 to a d20. And that had this weird mathematical impact of making crits less likely, but making rolling with hope more likely. I don't know, man. In general, I just don't love the crits. Otherwise, this disadvantage change is fine. I think it makes sense to a degree. I think people are very used to the idea of advantage and disadvantage, and I think advantage and disadvantage is a good system. I don't think you really need to mess with it. But it does absolutely make crits. Actually, the more I think about this, they don't get to, no, they choose which to use. I honestly think this is fine. They just don't get to choose which to use. I think this is fine. Just have them use the higher one. I don't know, man. The crits are weird to me. I don't love them. And choosing which to use seems like an arbitrary I mean, it's not arbitrary. Sorry, it's not arbitrary at all. It is purely to make crits more likely. And I don't think that they need to be as likely as all that. Yeah, I don't know. Now that we're here, I can restate we only got 1 crit last night, and we were playing with the new crit rules. Yeah, I get that. And, you know, maybe it's a bit much ado about nothing. But I think that this whole choose which to use, regardless of if it, like, when I say that, you know, the only reason they're doing that is to make crits more likely, I don't think that that is a good reason to make it different than disadvantage. Like, I think one of the benefits of the advantage-disadvantage system, one of the reasons it's so clean, is because advantage and disadvantage are the same, they're just opposite. Whereas this is making a weird distinction between advantage and disadvantage. Right? Advantage you get to choose, but disadvantage you take the lowest. Which, like, makes sense. You have to have disadvantage take the lowest. It would be odd if you could choose. But I think, like, just have it be the highest. I don't see a necessity to make crits more likely. They're already theoretically more likely than in something like D&D, and I don't think in D&D they need to be more likely. And I think that there's no reason to make them different for that goal, you know? Let's see. I did not love this change, mostly because it's closer to D&D again, but that's not based on actual analysis. We got 5 crit successes in 3 hours. It was a bit nuts at one point. I mean, it really just depends on how the dice are rolling, right? Same thing in D&D. But, like, I will compare that. In D&D, I do not think at all that crits need to be more likely in D&D. I've never thought that. They're already more likely to be rolled in Daggerheart. I definitely don't think that you need to make this asymmetrical where the only purpose is making crits more likely. Because that's the only reason that you would have choose which to use. There's no other reason. So I would just say you don't need to make it asymmetrical when that is the only reason. You know. The D20 stuff does still feel very weird to me. I honestly think they should remove the D20 and find a different mechanic for what they're trying to do there. Maybe. I could hear that argument. I would have to play a little bit more, but I could absolutely hear that argument. No, the GM must roll a D20 as a sign of dominance. The GM rolling a D20 is fine. The PC sometimes, the PC thing to sometimes use a D20 is what I think has to go. Yeah, it's certain. It is certain domains and classes. You're right, Daniel. It does just make the math a little bit weird. Yeah. That I think being forced to take the higher when you actually got a crit would be super sad. Which is one of the reasons that I think the crits are weird. I think it's one of the reasons the crits are odd, man. I don't know, man. Orderborn, I'm fine with D20 occasionally being a different die when it makes mathematical sense. I think the weird thing with making it a D20 is that it implicitly lowers the chance of rolling a crit, which is odd. It's just odd, mostly. That, like, the fact that it's not like an explicit buff, it is somewhat a buff, but also like a weird mathematical, like, semi-nerf. It's very, the changing die size I think is just odd more than anything, but I would get used to it. The video spent some time discussing this one in general. I might that honestly might be a reason that I do go and listen to the video at some point. I don't know if I'll do it on stream. But maybe I will, maybe I won't. They make Chris less likely, so it's not a strict upgrade. Yeah, exactly. And the wizard also hates D20 because they want to predict the number. Yeah, absolutely. The advantage disadvantage change, I mean, yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah. Look, I'm I'm down with it. I've said multiple times, I think advantage and disadvantage is a great system in D&D. So I absolutely understand changing it to mirror that. But I think that making it asymmetrical and making crits more likely, especially when there are quite a few things that can give advantage, I just don't think we need it. Yeah. Why aren't crits just 12s? I don't understand. Probably, I mean, I would maybe have to listen to them explain why. But I think it is because if you made it just 12s, that would be very, very, very unlikely. Right? That would way lower the chance. So I think they wanted to come up with a clean way of getting a relatively similar statistical chance to like D&D, even though it is a bit higher, while also, again, making it clean. And I've heard plenty of people say that doubles feel right to them, that doubles like totally make sense. I don't feel it. Even witnessing it during the playtest, I still feel like the doubles felt weird. But that's, kind of a preference thing, I think. I kind of want to try playing Wizard to see how it feels. I can't tell if it's fun or annoying from seeing it on paper. That's fair. The main thing they go over in the video is why, mathematically, they use double hope on both rather than double fear on anything. Wait, what? The main reason they go over in the video is why, mathematically, they used double hope on both rather than double fear on anything. Oh, that I understood. Honestly, that makes sense to me. Yeah. That feels totally fine to me. Because I think that, and I also think, I mean, even regardless of the mathematics, having advantage, disadvantage affect your hope die feels more thematically accurate to me. Because I think that generally, the way that I've interpreted the whole duality system is fear is thematically the world messing with you, whereas hope is your like impact on the world. And so I think having advantage, disadvantage affect your impact makes thematic sense. And I'm sure that the mathematics also make sense. I like that they are taking more steps away from D&D, actually. I haven't played Daggerheart yet, though, but I like that it's very different. Oh, me too. I love that it's different. That's why when they said advantage, disadvantage is a D6, I was totally down with that being advantage, disadvantage. I understand why they're moving towards this, but I think that doing it for the purpose of making crits and rolls with hope more likely, I don't know that is good motivation for this change. Like, the change I don't have insane problem with, but that motivation isn't really something I agree with, especially the crits part. Rolls with hope more likely, I mean, they're not unlikely right now. And with crits, like 3 of the 5 roll states are with hope already. So do we need to make hope more likely? I don't know, man. I mean, I feel like hope is already plenty likely. So I don't know. To me, the motivation behind this change, I don't know that I super agree with from what I see here. Does motivate me to potentially watch the video to hear them explain it a little bit more. If you're good at math, the reasoning might be intuitive. If you're not, it clarifies it pretty well. I am okay at math. I am very all right. Rolling an additional hope. Yeah. For advantage, disadvantage, you might intuitively think that they should do double fear and take highest for disadvantage. Doubling your fear doesn't work mathematically for the reason in the video. It makes you more likely to with fear, but it would also make you more likely to succeed. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yes. That makes total sense. if anyone, I don't know if anyone in chat is confused by what Daniel's saying, but even if you're, in the VOD and maybe confused by what Daniel means. Yeah, if you always takes highest, right? If you take highest, no matter if you are taking the highest of the fear, taking the highest of the hope, regardless of which die you're taking the highest of, you are making your final result higher. Like the final result is higher, so the likelihood that you are on the success side of the line is higher. So that would make disadvantage not make any sense. So that's why disadvantage has to be take lowest. And so if it has to be take lowest, it has to be applied to the hope die. Because you taking lowest of the fear die wouldn't make sense. And vice versa. You can't have it be, take highest of the fear die, take lowest of the hope die. Like, you have to have it on the same die. Otherwise, because otherwise the final result effect is too weird. It wouldn't make sense. So anyways. I don't know that my illustration helped that much, but it's like using luck in D&D and intentionally getting disadvantage. Yeah, kinda. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. Overall, I'm torn. Like, one side of this, I think advantage disadvantage is a good system. The other side of this, it does make hope and crits more likely, which I don't love. So I don't know. I don't know. I think that the system itself is more intuitive. But I don't think that hope needed to be rolled more. It's already rolled pretty often. I mean, I don't know. On half of your, it's more than half your shit is hope. So I don't know. Watch the video if you want, but what you laid out is essentially what they go over in the video, so you got that down? Sick. All right, cool. Help an ally. Updated to mirror the new advantage rule, allowing the PC who helps to roll their hope die. The player who is being helped can choose between either of them. Okay, sure. Add a rule that if a PC or adversary stress is ever full, they are vulnerable until they clear a stress? Whoa. That's interesting. What does that mean for adversaries that have zero stress? Like, I'm going to go check out the Quick Start adventure, because there were multiple adversaries that had zero stress. Does that mean that they're, like, instantly vulnerable? Let me just go check out the last one. The vulnerable thing, this did come up in the playtest. I'm very, very interested. I mean, I think that's cool. If you are, no adversaries have zero stress anymore. Okay, good. Number one, the zero stress thing was confusing. I thought it was just straight up confusing. I'm very, very down if they have no stress anymore, or if there's no zero stress anymore. I think that totally works, especially with you gaining, theoretically, PCs gaining less stress overall. I think making them vulnerable when they have max stress is reasonable, and I think it's evocative. I think it's cool. Yeah, I like that. Temporarily, when you are vulnerable, all rolls targeting you have advantage. It is interesting because this is typically only going to be like really important in combat, but I still think it works. I think that's a good way to balance out the no stress from below minor threshold change, and like still gain the simplicity gains of that change while not affecting the balance too much. Without playtesting, I'm into it. At least the 300-page version. I haven't looked at the new playtest yet. That's good. That's good. I think that any adversaries having 0 stress was already bad, so I'm glad that they changed that. And I think it also works better with this. Clarify that roll bonuses must be added before the roll. Okay. Group action rolls. Added group roll rule to help parties sneak through the castle together. Did they not already have this? I could have sworn they already had this. Maybe I'm wrong. Actually, that's a thing that Matt said in the video that I did find interesting. He suggested that you could stress out an adversary in conversation, and that's a great idea. Yeah. The only thing about that is like stressing out an adversary in conversation. Oh, it would make them vulnerable, and then rolls targeting have advantage. You know, I was thinking about it from the other side of adversaries doing it to PCs. But, I mean, GMs absolutely still make, like, social roles against PCs. Especially if, you know, you're Matt and you're really a fan of the contested roles. This absolutely applies. Yeah, interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I think that's a good change. I like that. I haven't seen explicit rules for stress in conversation, but it's easy to imagine rules for it. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I've said stress is a good non-combat detriment. So if you're doing a social encounter and, you know, you try to roll the equivalent of persuasion or charisma or whatever, and you take a consequence, it's very easy to just make that consequence stress. And vice versa for the adversary. Especially because there are adversaries that are specifically designed for social encounters. So I'm big into that. Added rule that tag team rolls only cost 1 action token. Clarified that on a roll with hope, the person whose role was chosen gains that hope. Okay, good clarifications. Succeed on intimidation, enemy gets stress. Absolutely, Daniel. Yeah. Big thumbs up. Yeah. Big thumbs up on that one. Damage rolls. Clarified the roll bonuses, and I will also say that sort of thing of the enemy gaining stress. I've talked about how one of my maybe gripes with D&D social encounters is that there's not a lot of feedback for the players on how things are going. The idea of stressing them out until they're vulnerable and then discovering that they're vulnerable is very nice feedback for the players on how the social encounter is going. So yeah, I like that. Damage rolls. Clarified that roll bonuses must be added. Clarified text on moves that use your damage prof to determine number of damage dice to roll. The move text for those now says using your damage proficiency or using your proficiency when space is limited. This has also been reflected across all cards. Okay, sure. Stress also carries into combat, so if negotiations break down and it turns into combat, the pre-fight conversation might have mechanical effects. Yeah. Big thumbs up. Yeah, I think you're totally right, Daniel. Damage types and resistance. Added rule that resistance and immunity apply before other damage reductions do. Okay. Added rule that multiple sources of resistance only count as 1. Sure. Added rule that resistance can only be applied once it doesn't stack. Sure. Okay. Lots of clarifications. Reaction rules. Clarified that roll bonuses must be added before the roll. Damage thresholds. Renamed the optional rule to take additional hit points on double your severe threshold. It is now massive damage. Makes sense. Hidden condition. While out of sight, you must spend a stress to become hidden, and you clear that condition if you enter line of sight. Okay. Targets can now target hidden creatures, but they're still made at disadvantage. Being hidden no longer gives you advantage on attacks unless you're a rogue. Interesting. This is sort of combining hiding with cover. And you have to spend a stress for it. And you immediately clear the condition if they enter line of sight. No check. This really just feels like cover. Like this doesn't feel like hidden. Unless I'm crazy. While hidden, any rolls against you are at disadvantage. When you move or attack while hidden, or when an enemy enters line of sight, you are no longer hidden. Is this even hidden? This is just cover. Am I crazy here? Am I taking crazy pills? Like this, like if you swapped out the name and called it the cover condition, totally. And I mean, you know, that makes even like you could say that, like they're hidden from sight. That's cover, I guess, but like this doesn't actually there's no real reason to do this in a stealth scenario. This is just cover for like a battle. Huh. Weird. Okay, rewiring my brain. Boo-doo-boo-doo-boo-doo. That's fine. Just, I mean, I guess there should be a disclaimer. Not useful for stealth missions. As a GM, I definitely say that most attacks can't work if you're fully actually hidden. Right. Like, attacks can now target hidden creatures. It's like, well, okay. So they're not stealthed. They're just literally visibly hidden. Which is fine. That's not bad. Like, I'm down with this. On a strict mechanical reading, I'm still down with it. Yeah, I would just give my players a little disclaimer. Do not use this in stealth missions. It doesn't actually provide value in stealth missions. But it absolutely does provide value in combat. Let's see. Clarify that when you move it as part of an action roll, you can move before or after, not both. Okay. Downtime. Downtime actions are now known as downtime moves. Sure. I guess that's actually... I was about to kind of shrug that off, but that's a fair clarification. I can see there being confusion there. I do think that they should just call that cover and call the unique stealth that rogues do equals actually being hidden. Yeah, I feel that, Raspberry. I think that would be fair. Death move. Revise the avoid death move for clarity. Cool. Gold is now expressed in coins, handfuls, bags, chests. No more fortunes. Each is now multiples of 10. Yeah, that's fair. The old gold system, like, I understood why they organized it the way they did. But multiples of 10 is I think it's just easier. Like, I think that their other multiple system was fine. You know, I think it, you know, there was an intuition there of like, oh yeah, like that makes sense. But I think that 10s is just easier. It's just more simple, more straightforward. Even rogues don't do fully hidden. They just get advantage on attacks. I think they also don't break hidden when they come into line of sight, right? I think that's the big thing of like actually hidden, you know? Targets can't see you even if they move into line of sight. I think that's the big thing that makes it actually hidden rather than just cover. Because the whole, like, you lose hidden when they move into line of sight. It's like, oh, okay, then you're not, what? You know? I was interested in how Mega would react to the gold. People seem split between this change is terrible or why does anyone care about this? Yeah. Like, I absolutely get it. I think that the more like artsy fartsy, like, oh, I want it to be unique and to feel right. Like, I think that side of me liked the old system more, but 10s are just so easy. Like, there's a reason we use decimal for most counting systems. It's just easy. It's just easy. And it's like, not everything has to be crazy and cool and fun. Sometimes it's good to just make it straightforward. You know? I didn't realize rogues got better on that part too. Okay, rogues are actually hidden then. Yeah. Rogues are actually real hidden. Everyone else is just taking cover. In the general rules about hidden, it reads like the advantage is the only extra rogues get. That's true. Yeah. Lack of editor strikes again. Yeah. Wait, so can enemies target creatures they can't see? Yes. Yes, they can. If they can target hidden creatures, isn't hiding then worse than just being out of line of sight? No, you can only hide when you're out of line of sight. So it is while out of sight, you must spend a stress to become hidden, and you clear that condition if you enter line of sight. Attacks can now target hidden creatures, but they're still made at disadvantage. So attacks can target you while you're out of line of sight, which is weird, if you ask me. That's kind of weird to me. They can target you if you're out of line of sight. I don't know, man. Like, I guess that makes sense for like a fireball, but like an arrow can target you when you're out of line of sight? I don't know. This is maybe something that needs a little bit more cooking. Maybe. Like, it's fine right now, but I don't know. How does line of sight work? I don't know, dude. In addition to the 10s, the smallest unit is also coins instead of bags. Yeah. I think when they made it bags, they were trying to capture the same thing that Blades in the Dark captures, where you only track gold or wealth when it comes to larger purchases, but then they didn't make a system for interacting with smaller purchases, which is what Blades in the Dark has lifestyle rules for. So they basically said, hey, like, just ignore smaller purchases, but I don't think people like that. Personally, I'm probably house ruling this during 1.3. I expect it to be clarified, edited again in 1.4, probably. But can they target you when you're not hidden but out of line of sight? I would assume. Otherwise, this would be... Otherwise, you would be nerfing yourself by going hidden, which is hilarious, but I don't know. I would assume they must be able to. I don't think they changed the idea of food in rooms, etc., being less than a gold, which is just RP flavor when you're assumed to have enough, so the gold change is mostly just flavor anyway. Yeah, I mean, all of those gold names are just flavor anyway. I think the big main thing is just making it multiples of 10, and I think that's totally fair. As far as I can think, I don't know the last word there. They explicitly say they don't do anything with specifics of gold, leaving it up to the DM setting. Yeah, which is also very fair, because as I've gone over repeatedly with D&D, and why I've criticized D&D for 5e for not having a default setting, is that the moment that you make things certain gold amounts, you are creating a setting, even if no one can see it. So I think that's very smart of them. As far as I can tell. Also, warning ad incoming. Let's see. 44 seconds. Okay. Yeah. We'll take a quick break. But let's get through movement. Clarify. Oh, wait, we're so high up. Wait. There we go. Downtime. Added optional rule for turn-based initiative, moving GM-facing action tracker rules to Chapter 3, replacing them with player-facing summaries. Whoa! We're going to have to look at that when we get back. Turn-based initiative? An optional rule. Lots to look at there when we come back from break. I did not mean to make this such a explicit cliffhanger, but damn, it just happened that way. I will see you after we get back from the ad. See you soon. We've got a few more seconds on the ad. Ugh. But let's see. Yeah. 10 more. It's really nice as an option on paper. It's still pretty open. Optional rule on initiative. Gotcha. I was vibing with that. The music, it's still quiet in the background. I don't know if you can hear it. Okay. Before we look at the rule, I'm curious to see, because I thought about an optional initiative rule. Because I was like, maybe my players will really want initiative. Like, if I had to, especially after, playing Sablewood Messengers or whatever, how would I do it? And I thought of a system, so I'm really curious to see how close it is. Because I wanted it to be as light and unobtrusive as possible. So my initial thought for an initiative system in Daggerheart. Prediction, their rule is very similar to yours. I mean, I was trying to make it as light as I could, so if they also went that way, they'll probably at least be similar. My thought was just PCs pick order. When the action tracker comes out, they pick their own order. Leave it up to them. Then, GM gets free turn after PCs. GM doesn't get free turn on fear rolls. That was what I came up with. I was like, it's 3 rules. It is 3 rules. The PCs just pick an order at the beginning. GMs get a free turn after the PCs all the time consistently, and then GM doesn't get a free turn for fear. That's what I came up with. I think that likely this would wind up sort of nerfing the GM side of things. But I also was like, I'm going to think about it a little bit, but I probably won't think about it too much until I'm actually in a situation where I need it. Your list of rules is short, but it makes some fundamental changes. Theirs is less impactful. Interesting. Less impactful. I was trying to go minimum impact, so I'm curious. But also, to be fair, I didn't spend nearly as much time thinking about it as I'm sure they did. Yours would probably be fine, though. I think it would fundamentally, rebalance some things. So I'm actually glad to hear that theirs is less impactful. Because I think that less impactful would be better in this case. So I really want to see it. Added an optional rule for turn-based initiative. Move GM-facing action tracker rules to Chapter 3. So where would this be? Where would this mechanic be? I'm kind of sad they didn't link to it. Let's see. Full example of playing an adventure? Flow of the game, narrates details, resolve actions, on your turn, moves in combat. Moment to moment. Action tracker, maybe? Action tracker? Placing action tokens, adversary actions, once the GM. Optional rule. Aha, I found it. If your group prefers tactical play or structured player turns, you can limit the number of action tokens each PC can use on the action tracker at a time. It is recommended to start with 3, but you may decrease or increase the number as your table prefers. What? Okay. When the action tracker is in use, every player places that number of action tokens on their character sheet, ready for use. Players then act as usual, and each time they make an action roll, they spend 1 available action token by moving it to the table's action tracker, collaborate with other players on passing play around the table, making moves and telling the story together, even if you have multiple action tokens. See if any other players want to turn before you spend more than one in a row. Once every player's used their available tokens, players refill their character sheet with the same number of tokens as before, then continue playing. Okay. Theirs is less impactful. I actually, overall, I think I like theirs more than mine. Whoa, crazy. What? They put more thought into it? No, I like that. I think that's very fair. I think that's it sticks to the very open nature of everything. Yeah, just like limiting the amount. And I even think, because one of the things that I pointed out in like the GM complication and the player responsibility and all that is the lack of consistency on when the GM will go. I think if you even wanted to address that, you could make it to where like they all have like maybe 2 action tokens, and then if they run out of action tokens when they refill, the GM gets a free turn. There's maybe something there with like them taking their turns a certain amount. It maybe procs a GM turn. I could see something there. Or maybe if they use all of their tokens and the GM hasn't taken a turn since the last time they refilled, then the GM gets a free turn. There's something there. I think this is way simpler, and I think addresses the main thing that they were trying to address. But I'm even thinking about it I'm just thinking about it in terms of my major issues / complaints with the game. And I think there's like a very minor tweak you could make to this to maybe even address some of the things that I've identified. If you wanted to. Yeah. I like it. I really like this turn-based initiative. I even think, I'm a big proponent of no initiative, no round. Like, I'm a big proponent of that. I love it in Blades in the Dark. This is something I could see myself wanting to use, legitimately. Like, it's because it's so dependent on whatever your table wants. It's like recommended to start with 3, but you can increase or decrease however your table prefers. Like, and I also think something that they kind of mentioned, if your group prefers tactical play or structured player turns, this actually does go towards one of my concerns about, potential like analysis paralysis in combat when it comes to more challenging encounters of, are we going to want someone else to go when, Rob has the best ability for the situation? If you limit the number of turns like this, you kind of force them to not just pick the best thing for the situation every time. They might want to spread it out because they might say, oh, maybe that'll be more useful later. I could see myself actively using this optional tool. And, like I said, you modify the number. You can move it up down to 2, up to 4, whatever. I could very much see my table using this. Yeah, I like that. I was wrong in you nailing it, but I feel justified that you at least liked it. Yeah, I did not nail it, but I do like it. I like it a lot. My game yesterday tried the 3 action tokens initiative. However, each player ended up using all their tokens in a row, which left some people not doing much. It was a short combat. Interesting. That's sort of a problem. Like, using all their action tokens in a row. The only thing that this does is put a cap on, that sort of behavior, right? Going a bunch of turns in a row. The only difference between this system and the normal system is that they could have used it more than 3 times in a row. But to an extent, maybe, they felt like, oh, if I don't use it now, I won't be as useful later. Like, I can maybe see that maybe there's like a mental effect But definitely in terms of the mechanics, the only thing that this did is actually sort of mitigate maybe more widespread use of that behavior mechanically. But I do very much see that there could be a mental effect where they feel like it's like a use it or lose it sort of situation, maybe. This is a pretty new group, though. Others had played once before. Me and the other player were new, so we'd probably get better at collaboration and ball passing over time. Also true. Also very, very true. Yeah. For smaller combats, would make sense to use one token. That's very true. You could scale the number of tokens by like the size of the combat, by the difficulty of the combat. That's sort of like, maybe saying the quiet part out loud a little bit. Like, maybe you don't want to reveal how long or short this is going to be. But I think for most combats, you're probably going to have a pretty good idea of that just by looking at them. So that could be an option of like, this is going to be a longer combat versus this is going to be a shorter combat, and you have a different amount of tokens based on that. I think that's a great idea, Phoenix. If you can predict it'll be shorter, sometimes as a GM you are surprised. Also very true. Also very, very true, yeah. It felt like you have 3 tokens to use this round, encourage taking more actions in a row compared to fluid no initiative. Yeah, the mental side of it. I can see that. I can definitely see that. The same thing can happen in 5e with a strict initiative too. Sometimes the enemy gets one shot with a save or suck or something. Yeah, can happen. Absolutely, yeah. I just realized that Timpanist is AKL. Yeah. I don't know how AKL I think AKL Timpanist would have to change. Would have to like get Truffle and then like modify it in Truffle. I think there's like a whole thing. It's an interesting point that you think it encouraged them to spend them by giving them a specific number. It is definitely that effect is a measurable effect that has been studied in psychology. I don't know enough about it to like speak super intelligently on it, but I do know that that's a very real thing of like a mental side of it, of when you feel like you can only do so much, sometimes you are spurred into more action as opposed to when there is less constraints. Kind of like the timer that we were talking about in Critical Role. But yeah, sometimes having those more limited resources actually spurs you into burning through your resources more. You see the same thing with like dehydration, with like people drinking more water, the less they have of it in a survival scenario. Like drinking too much, not rationing as well. Same thing with food. It's one of the reasons in the Weird Wasteland resource dies, I love the mathematical impact. If you don't know resource dies, because I'm about to talk about them in detail because I actually think that the concept is very similar. Basically, a resource die is, instead of saying you have 20 days worth of rations, it says you have a rations box. And that box holds 1d8 of food. Maybe I should redraw that 8. 1d8 of food. And every time you eat out of the rations box, once a day, whatever, you roll that 1d8 on a result of 3 to 8, nothing happens. On a result of 1 to 2, the 1d8 transforms into a 1d6. And then you repeat this process, but the failure values always stay at 1 to 2. So now the chance of failing on a 1d6 is higher than the chance of failing on a 1d8, which directly goes towards this sort of psychological effect of the less you have, the more you want to eat and spend them and whatever. And then the 1d6 can go down to the 1d4. And if you fail on a 1d4, you have no die left. That means you're out of food. So I love resource dies. And then when you fill up on food, like if you just go and buy food generically, then you increase the value of your die. And anyone in the party, if 2 people have a rations box, and also certain the size of the container matters. So like you can have like bigger or smaller rations boxes. So they have like a max die size on them. Gives a reason to get a wagon, which is cool. But having if like two of your party members, like one of your party members is at 1d8 and one of them's at 1d4, the person with 1d8 can choose to go down to 1d6 to raise the 1d4 up to 1d6 as well, which makes you, the 1d8 person, more likely to fail, but makes the 1d4 person less likely to fail, which I think is so cool. I love resource dies. And I think that sort of, psychological impact is that this mechanic is sort of going after with the, with the mathematical like failure chance is probably the same sort of thing that AKL is sort of realizing, it's like the gambling fallacy. Yeah. I do find these things really interesting. Yeah. And the math on them is really interesting. But the weird math does remind me of exploding dice and how it can make 1d4 not a strict downgrade. Yeah, which does make die size with exploding dice a little bit more wibbly wobbly. I think it makes it harder to explicitly grok. I'm pretty neutral on exploding dice. Sometimes I like them, sometimes I don't. I like the idea of this, but I do not grok the math effects. Okay. Let me see if I can explain them a little bit more clearly. So on a 1d8, failure is on a 1 or a 2. So that is 1/4 of the possible roll values, right? You could roll a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So a 1 and a 2, that is a fourth of the roll values. It's a 25% chance of failing. A 1d6, the failure values are still 1 and 2, but now on a 1d6, that's a 1/3 chance of failure. And on a 1d4, failure values are still a 1 and 2, so that's a 1/2 failure chance. So the lower dice that you're using, so like a 1d8 only has a 25% chance to fail. A 1d4 has a 1/2. And every time you fail, you lower the value of your die. So it makes like being fully stocked much more important. Yeah, that helps. Yeah, seeing it a little bit more explicitly. It's the fact that these failure values never change. That's the that's what makes this sort of mathematical impact, is because these failure values are always the same, even as the possible roll values shrink. Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. So yeah, I love resource dies, and I think that in a less positive way, I think that might be part of what's maybe going on with their limiting system. But I also think that with that limiting system, it is like a purely psychological thing. And there is a chance that, familiarity could kind of break through that wall. It would definitely need more testing. In Heart, you have a specific stress track for rations, supplies, etc. And whenever you take stress on that track, you roll a d12. If the number you roll a d12. If the number is equal to or under your stress track number, you take fallout, negative consequence, which could be you're out of ammo or starving or what have you, depending on what's going on in the fiction. That's cool. That's very cool. That's a good way. I think that's a good way to handle it. If you really want to abstract the rations aspect, if you really kind of don't want to think about it a lot, just tying it to stress is a very cool idea, I think. Let's see. I like that. I love resource dies. Resource dies are cool. Weird Wastelands in general is a very cool third-party module, but resource dies are awesome. The size of the die gives you a hard guarantee on minimum amount. A 1d8 cannot fully fail earlier than 3 rolls. Wait, what? The size of the deck gives you a hard guarantee on minimum amount. A 1d8 cannot fully fail. No, a 1d8 absolutely can fail. If you roll a 1 on a 1... Oh. You mean you can't run out of food? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. If you have a 1d8, you will not fail in more than 3. Yeah, you won't... You could fail the roll, but that would just lower the die size. Yes, absolutely. And the higher the die size is, so it both gives you a higher chance to not fail individually and sets a hard limit on how quickly it's even possible for you to run out. Yes. But the smaller the number, the more likely. Yeah. Dice math is interesting, but the tricky thing for game designers is that how players feel matters more than the math quite often. Yes, which is why I absolutely love resource die, because I think it both makes sense mathematically and feels really good. I think this turn-based initiative might not fully get there, where like it totally makes sense to me looking at it on paper, but maybe the feel isn't quite there. I'll have to test it out a lot more. Yeah, I should have specified that. Yeah, I got the implication, but that's definitely interesting. As I remember, this game is also called Daggerheart. Yes. Yeah, that's fair. Oh, I didn't even think about connecting it to like heart versus, yeah, that's fair. And maybe especially how they feel early on, like in a beta test like this, compared to how they might feel after 10 games, which they won't play if they don't like the feel. I think it is why so often... I think it's why I'm glad that Daggerheart gives you a lot of cool stuff very instantly. It gives you your subclass instantly. I think it is why, so classically, so many D&D players do XP to level 3. So it's such a common thing that they fucking named a YouTube channel after it. But I think that's why XP to level 3 is such a common thing, because you want to make the players feel cool and interesting and feel good really early on. So I like the aspect of them giving, subclasses really early. I think the domain cards are very interesting. Even if there's a lot more, to go later. There's got to be known ways to take that into account for organized testing. Like force themselves friends to always play X number of times. Very interesting process. Yeah. There must be known ways. I definitely do not know them. In scientific testing, they usually have a minimum amount the tester has to do before getting paid, and they will not use the same tester twice, so they're always testing the fresh experience. Paige knows a lot more about this sort of thing. Paige got a psych degree. So she knows she had to do these sorts of things and study these sorts of processes. I got a computer science degree. So I worked in IT. Scientific rigor is not necessarily the name of the game in those fields. Not sure if CR is doing it formally though. Yeah, it certainly makes it harder with past biases when you're testing the 10th iteration. It certainly does. Yeah. Anyways, okay, that's an interesting system. Also, I got about half an hour left before the soft out. So, but I think that was a good thing to go over in detail. What's up? Oh, sorry. Paige wanted me to clarify that she got 2 degrees. What? One of them was psych. The other was advertising, which I didn't mention because I thought that she might not want people to know that she's a dirty advertiser. She says, we've already talked about it. News is already out. No, Paige got 2 degrees. She was very good at school. I was very not. I also have a CS degree, but my wife is in medical device testing. That makes sense. It really must. But then again, if you test games for a living, maybe you learn how to roll with that. True. Maybe. Yeah. I certainly do not know. New section clarifies how to round numbers up, how to handle simultaneous and stacking effects, and how to spend a resource. That's good. I think that those are all good things to include in general rules. When you multiclass, you now gain access to the standard class feature. That makes sense. Simpler, more consistent. That makes sense. Rebalanced all equipment. Fair enough. You can equip switch weapons as an action. Your 2 inventory weapon slots can now contain any combination of primary and secondary weapons. Oh, that's kind of interesting. That's interesting. Okay. Everybody now starts with 6 armor. You can't switch armor in danger or under pressure, and you cannot carry additional armor in your inventory. Very fair. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't even think about that needing a clarification, but there's room for abuse there otherwise. Proficiency is now known as damage proficiency, but it remains shortened to proficiency on cards and character sheets. Sure. Remove damage penalty for throwing weapons. Okay. Change the Ring of Unbreakable Resolve. Okay, fair enough. Reorganized and revised everything for clarity. Hooray! Especially within core GM mechanics. Okay, this is one of the things that I thought really needed reorganization, so I'm glad to hear it. I honestly won't look too deep into it, but I am happy to hear that they got feedback that it needed it. Making move sphere. Added rules for using environments. Awesome. Fuck yeah, dude. That's okay. I actually am going to check that out. Using environments. Environments represent everything in the scene, from physical environments. Environments can also represent. The environments have stat blocks? Oh, fuck yeah, dude. Oh, this is awesome. This is this is so cool. Oh, I'm so into this. Absolutely. Yeah. Huge thumbs up. That's awesome. That is very, very cool. That absolutely takes one of the things that I really loved about Fear and the whole concept and just builds it out and adds more depth without making it more complicated. You don't have to use the environment, it's like an adversary. I love that. Making environments, use a similar feel of a stat block to something like an adversary, I think is a good move. I'm sure there's some ability to compensate. I missed this in 1.3. Didn't realize you could dual wield primaries. Mechanically, I think that's still generally a downside. Yeah, I think so too. But it is nice to allow it, yeah. Here's the environment moves I alluded to earlier. Yeah. May seems to think we were talking about world building, which is fair. I did not realize it was this mechanical. I think it's so cool. Yeah. I heard about these, but haven't checked them out yet. I need to. I'm going to be looking into these in more detail, but just like looking at them in general looks so cool. I am so down with it. And the great thing about this, and the thing that I think will be so interesting about this, is that, it's like coming soon. I'm sure a lot of it is coming soon. But if they abstract a lot of this into environmental stat blocks, they could absolutely develop easy guidance for the types of environments to use in Tier 0 and the way to balance certain environments. Honestly, this is maybe the best thing that I have seen towards abstracting interesting battle arena creation. Like, at the end of the day, this isn't going to tell you how to put down terrain and how to make interesting zones and how to make moving feel right. But this goes a lot of the way towards it. And you can't even really do that in Daggerheart since players help, construct the battle arenas as it is in the default, the default rules. So making this environment stat blocks, I think this is maybe one of, if not the best way I have ever seen a system try to handle, hey, DMs, here's like our recommendations. Here's like an easy formula to follow. Here's a builder on how to make an interesting battle arena. Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. I mean, obviously, you can always choose to ignore it if you think, you can make better battle arenas, but great guidance. This is the sort of shit I wish was in something like the DMG. Like, that's exactly the sort of thing. Fucking awesome. The specific ones in the books are too niche for my taste, but I absolutely love the overall system. That's exactly what I'm thinking is like, will I use these? I don't know, maybe. But the fact that they're, putting them into tiers and they're making these stat blocks means that they can do something like, here's an easy way to do it yourself. Like the D&D 5e DMG has recommendations for homebrew spells, homebrew enemies. Like they have balancing recommendations for those things. So making it into a system like this where all of them have stat blocks makes it easier to come up with that homebrew advice in a much more concise and digestible manner. Oh, big thumbs up. Huge thumbs up. I haven't looked into the details, but the concept makes my brain go burr. Yeah, really, really the guidance for homebrew is robust. Hope the homebrew is robust and the community runs with it. Yep, me too. Things like spawning this specific enemy for an ambush. I don't want the general ones in the book to be that specific, but whatever. Yeah. I don't disagree with that. Yeah. I'm looking forward to the GM guidance. Me too. I really hope, I think we will. I think we will get a playtest that has all of that sort of stuff in it before they go, full release. And that is what I will be really, really interested in. Even the adversaries. Like the adversaries, I think the stat blocks look fine. I think, the ones that they have in there are some interesting ones. I'm really interested to see what does the DM guidance look like for creating your own adversaries. Because at the end of the day, people love the adversaries that are in the monster manual. They love the adversaries that are, in Volo's guide, whatever. But I think people really love making their own, homebrewing. And really good and robust guidance also provides great guidance for improving. You might not always have an adversary prepped that you pulled out of the monster manual, and you need to come up with one on the spot. So being able to clip the guidance for creating a homebrew one makes it way easier to improv. And so having stat blocks for environments like this, if they go a direction that you didn't plan and you have the stat or the guidance for here's how to create a interesting homebrew environment, using these sort of features and mechanics, that makes it significantly easier to improv. So I'm big thumbs up. Big thumbs up. My favorite ever system has a version of this, but I like this version better, which is saying a lot. Hell yeah. Cortex Plus, which is ancient now, and there are new versions I haven't checked out. Oh, interesting. I'm glad Daggerheart is likely going to be one book and not three, at least as far as it seems so far. I agree. I think, yeah, I agree. I won't get too much into D&D talk, but I would much prefer all of the things to run a good and cool game to be all in one book. And because it's like 5 very simple and very flexible mechanics, almost everything is similar to Daggerheart experiences where it's a word or a phrase that is applied as needed. Yeah. CR just came out with new merch item, which is slightly spoilers for Mega, not like in terms of plot, but it's a recreated thing from C1. I don't know how well you do at avoiding those kinds of notifications or just glancing over them. I don't really get them. I wouldn't have, I don't even know where I would have seen that. Because I don't really interact with social media beyond YouTube, if you consider YouTube social media. And my eyes scroll, if I see a CR person, my eyes glaze over for a second. I peripheral them out. Yeah. Anyways. Let's see. Wait, where was I? Where was I? Absolutely awesome, though. Using the action tracker. Moved GM facing instructions from chapter 2 to here and clarified guidance on how to activate adversaries. That's awesome. That's very awesome. I may have to look over that in more detail later. But I really like that. Move them all into the same place. Give the GMs, all their guidance is right here. I like more guidance on how to activate adversaries. Big ups in general. You may have actually played it before if you play licensed games. Oh, interesting. Oh, very interesting, Daniel. What's up? Chewing on something. What are you chewing on? What's she chewing on? Ew. Is it just like mulch? What the fuck? Gross, bird. What are you doing? Oh my goodness. Anyways. Adversary action rules. Added guidance on handling non-attack adversary moves with a chance of failure. Adversaries moved adversary rules to chapter 4. Interesting. Okay. Social conflict. Added guidance. Hell yeah. Chapter 4. Adversaries and environments. All rules and stat blocks involving adversaries and environments have been moved into this chapter, except for the optional information on adversary balance, which is now in chapter 6. Using adversaries, significantly revised and expanded adversary guidance. I might have to look into that. We'll see. Divided adversary features into actions, which require spending an action token from the action tracker. Reactions, which happen in response to a move. Interesting. And passives, which always apply. Very interesting. Improvising adversaries. Streamlined guidance on improvising adversaries. This is what I wanted. Added a new table for easily adjusting statistics. Love it. I'm definitely going to have to go and look at this stuff. Stat blocks now list their tier next to the title and adversary type. Rebalanced all adversaries for the updated mechanics and streamlined to make GMing easier. This is what I'm looking for. Some higher tier adversaries are temporarily omitted while rebalancing continues. Minor thresholds now start at 1. Makes sense with the stress changes. And damage is scaled for new armor and threshold values. Okay, let's check it out. I don't care as much about chapter 5, so let's check out chapter 4 in a bit more detail. Let's see. This is all using environments. Let's see. Adversaries. Let's see. Chapter contains the following stat blocks. Does it give you, is this where the advice on improvising is? It doesn't look like it. Okay, not here. Let's see. Oh, I could have just looked here. Adversaries and environments. Probably here. Using adversaries. Many NPC encounters don't involve conflict, so you don't need the character statistics for everyone inhabiting your world. Adversary breakdown. This is a stat block. Moves and tactics. I'm looking for the improvising table. Adversaries tend to have fewer and broader experiences than PCs. That's interesting. It's good to call that out explicitly. I did kind of notice that, but it's good to call it out. Reaction roll. Example experiences. Adversary features. This is going over it all in detail, which I do think it needs, but I'm looking for a quick little thing, which I figured they mentioned a table, which is kind of what I'm looking for right now. Yeah, especially this improvising adversaries section. Let's see. Fear moves, choosing adversaries. Okay. For an easy encounter, use fewer enemies or larger enemies of a lower tier. Sure. Try using a number of standard adversaries equal to party size, potentially replacing one with a bruiser. Okay. Okay. I mean, I like that they're giving some very vague guidance here. I think that giving this guidance, and then it's right here, playtesters. I absolutely think that putting out some guidelines on what they think is the case and getting feedback on that early will allow them to provide a lot more detail and a lot more value. Because right now, I think that they're referencing specific types, which I mean I don't hate, but I don't know that I love. But I do think that having playtesters go under these guidelines and seeing how it goes is definitely the right way to go about it. Let's see. Using minions and hordes. Lots of guidance here. Defeating improvising adversaries. This is exactly what I'm looking for. When planning your session, or even in the middle of one, you can adjust an existing adversary's stat block to fit the needs of your battle. Sometimes you want to use an adversary, but they're too powerful or not powerful enough. You might want to replace a feature or two, then present them as an entirely different creature. Absolutely, I do. Chapter 5 provides an in-depth information on adversary balance. It does. Let me check that out. And how to scale existing adversaries or create new ones, but especially if you're mid-session. Yes, I want to tape this to the back of my GM screen. You don't want to make a lot of decisions. Don't sweat the details. You can roughly adjust the stat block to a different tier by simply replacing its existing characteristics with those listed in the improvised statistics by tier table. Please. Okay. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. This is exactly what I want. I want to pin this to the back of my GM screen. Beautiful. I was looking for this on my initial react. I want this. I want the exact same thing for an environment. I love that they have this. And then adding or changing features. When scaling an adversary to a higher tier, considering adding a new feature that make them a greater threat. Sure. Okay. Similarly, if scaling down, consider removing. Okay. It's just add or remove. Fair enough. I would maybe like a little bit more from that, but I also would understand if they don't feel like they can give more, since some of the abilities are a bit vague or abstract. Horde, minion, and solo adversaries vary significantly in power. The following guidance can help you improvise. Horde. Their standard attack should deal high damage, then reduce roughly by half when the horde has been reduced to half HP. Okay. Give them a flat damage value for their standard attack and use that value for their group attack feature. You also set the value of their minion feature, determining how much damage is needed to defeat additional minions of that name in one attack. I would like a little bit of guidance here. This one is relative. And it does say like deal high damage, whatever. I would like a little bit of guidance on minionization of, for like different, like maybe like a tier table or something, but not bad. I mean, certainly better than no advice. Give them high damage, high HP, and features that let them act more frequently, like Relentless, and or features that force PC to add extra action tokens. I mean, that all makes sense. Similar to Minion. I'd like a little bit maybe like relative, maybe relate it to tier, something like that. This is how I was going to rebalance the quick start adventure before I forgot and just ran with the old numbers. Fair enough. But I like this. I like a lot of this. I like this as a start. I would like for there to be a little bit more down here, but it's an improvement over what it was. Oh, so this is in creating your world. I don't know that I would put in-depth information on adversary balance in creating your world. I think I would keep it within adversaries and environments, or maybe even adversary stat blocks. Or maybe down in customizing your game. Maybe that's where it is. It's in chapter 5, like customizing your game, potentially. Is it? Let's see. Balance. An adversary system balance is a work in progress. This section is under heavy development. Hell yeah. Great. When creating or scaling... Okay, so it is... This is in chapter 6, though. They said it was in chapter 5, right? My chapter 5 prevents in-depth information. Maybe that's just a typo. I don't know. I seriously need to study this part. It's hard, though, since I have so little experience. I need, like, a GM workshop with test combats. That'd be kind of fun. I mean, this is why I want them to make, like, general relations of, like, what is heavy damage for this tier? For this tier, what should I consider heavy damage? It's actually something that I think D&D does somewhat well in a lot of their guidance, is they say, okay, this DC or this attack mod for this level is considered easy, medium, brutal, impossible, whatever. I think that's something that D&D does relatively well in a lot of cases. I'd like to see more of that. I basically want to see this table, but for absolutely everything. So, like, don't just give it to me on tier. Make this a 2D table. Make this like a 2D table, and you'll have to have multiple tables, right? You'll have to have an attack modifier table, a damage dice table, a difficulty table, damage threshold table. Like, give me a table for each of these that is based on tier and the difficulty within that tier. So whether it's easy, medium, difficult, hard, or hard, extreme, whatever. That's what I would really like to see out of this. But to that end, you can make some inferences on this to do that if you're planning things out. The reason I want them to provide those tables is not for if I'm planning this out. If I'm planning this out, I can use this and I can infer that these are all, average or medium or whatever. And I can, go up or down. That's a bit harder to do in the moment, I think. Like, if I'm in the moment and I want to make, an easy tier 3, or like a soft hitting tier 3, well, does that mean it's a 3d12? Does that mean it's a 2d12? Like, is an easy tier 3 the same as an average tier 2? I don't know. That's a bit harder to litigate in the moment. So I'd like a little bit more detailed guidance. I think most of us either go in blind or play under a GM until we go, I can do better. Yeah, fair enough. Chapter 6 used to be the old Chapter 5. It could be a typo. Yeah, I think that might just be what it is. I would like a 2-day seminar where I could run 30 mini games and encounters with discussions with analysis with other GMs. Potentially. I mean, that could be cool. I don't know how popular it would be, but that sounds like maybe something that a creator could put together. I'm not gonna. I don't know. Maybe that's something that 3 or 4 years into the future Mega does, but definitely not right now. But I think that a creator could pitch that and maybe it would get some traction. I just need the reps, ideally without having to worry about those pesky player enjoyment every single time. Lol. I feel you. Also, thank you for the follow, Raspberry. I appreciate it. Interesting. But I do think it would be hard enough to organize that you'd have to change. I think it would be hard enough to organize that you'd have to change way too much to do it. Charge way too much. That makes sense. Yeah, I think that's why it makes more sense as a creator-led thing. So let's say, I don't know, someone like Dungeon Dudes or Critical Role, Dungeon Dudes, whatever, like that sort of channel, I could see putting it together because then they don't have to just make money back based on attendance. They can also make a ton of content around it. They can make like, we ran fucking 30 games of D&D. Here are the average roll values. Here are the most used monsters. Here are the most played classes. Like, I think you could make, I think especially someone like Dungeon Dudes, who I absolutely do not mean this as an insult, but I think those dudes could absolutely squeeze every drop of water from a stone. Like, they are some of the best people, I think, at doing the most with the least in terms of like a conceptual idea and still making the content interesting. So I think that Dungeon Dudes could absolutely make the convention. Yeah, could do it as a loss leader. Exactly. You make the convention a loss leader, and then you make a load of content around various aspects of the convention to actually make the money back. I think that could work. But I don't know that something like Wizards of the Coast could do it. Unless Wizards of the Coast use their fucking YouTube channel ever. Like, I'm very happy that Wizards has started posting on there for like the 1D&D updates, but that YouTube channel is criminally underused. They could do so much more with it. I'm thinking of this like when I learned dog training. I went to a bunch of pretty costly convention/seminars with big name trainers, and I wasn't even trying to go pro, just learn from the best. And connect with other people into the same aspects of the hobby. Maybe. I mean, I think I certainly, I don't know shit about convention organization. So there's probably a way to do it, but I'm super not aware of it. Which of those could do it with the right people? They do not have the support right now. Have support the right people? Yeah, probably. Okay, let's see. Baseline attack modifiers by tier. -4 to +4, averaging 0. -3 to +5. Exact. Okay, this is great. This is okay. I understand why they, put this into its own thing. I get it. Man, I'm really debating. Let me go back to that other one. What was that other one? Attack modifier 0. Man, do we really think that it would really complicate the table all that much more if you put +4, -4 on it? Maybe I'm taking, maybe I'm insane. Maybe I'm smoking weed out here, but I think this table could be improved if you just put the range values on it. And if I'm but to an extent, I can print this shit out and I can write my little -4 +4 on it. Like, I can make this work for my screen. I'm glad that the information is all there. I was worried that the information just wouldn't be there and it wouldn't be like nice and concise. But I can make this work. Giving me a range, giving me a top to bottom range, I can totally make this work. I'm really glad it's there. Yeah, interesting. Let's see. Not gonna lie, I feel like gym workshops could get toxic. TTRPGs are a complicated hobby. There's a lot, and they're a bit like dog training. I am sure that there are a couple of established ways to do it, and they can kind of like put that on the poster, TTRPGs are a pretty complicated. I think, not to say that dog training is uncomplicated, but I think that TTRPGs might be a more complicated hobby, and so it might be harder to present that. But I still don't think it's impossible. I think it might just be more complicated, but I don't know. I haven't even seen you smoke weed even once. Clearly, you're thinking clearly. I don't smoke weed. That's the thing. I think the tables are a target audience thing. The first with simple numbers or for GMs that aren't confident enough to do more than a single number. That's fair. That's fair. I'll just end it. That's fair. Maybe. No, I'm asking too much. I'm being picky right now. I'm like, well, they could make 2 tables. They could make the simple table and then they could make the more complicated tables, which is essentially what they're doing. I'm just being nitpicky about the way that they're presenting it, and that's not fair. So I'll shove that. They could easily include these ranges. They could. I don't know. The other table is for the ones who go, I want the upper end of damage, but the lower edge of defense. Yeah. Dog training is very decisive, but if you advertise a clicker training conference, you're not going to get old school yank and zap trainers showing up. Yeah, exactly. I think there's a little bit more like a narrow things with dog training, whereas TTRPGs are very broad. I don't know if you're asking for too much. With an editor pass, hopefully they will streamline it a bit. Maybe, yeah. Easily could combine into one table yourself. That's kind of where I'm getting to, Zenshi, is it's like, look, as long as all of the information is there, I think that you absolutely can still levy critiques about presentation and editing and what have you. But honestly, me as a DM, as long as all of the information is there somewhere, I can streamline it myself on my end, ultimately. So as long as all of it's there, I'm above 0. I'm positive on it. Could I be higher? I could be higher, but I'm positive. I get you. Presentation editing is important, but hopefully they will get that down the line. Yeah, exactly. Let's see. So yeah, I love this. Giving me the range of this tells me average is 0. If I want them to have the lowest number that is still reasonable, I can do -4. If I want them to have the highest number that's still reasonable, I can do +4. I love that. That's perfect. This is exactly what I want. And there's an ad incoming. No. Shit. Oh, wait. I can snooze. I'm just going to snooze it because I think we're nearing the end of what all I want to talk about. So I'm just going to snooze ads for a little bit. We're going to keep pushing through. But we're going to have to pick up the pace a little bit. So I love these. Ooh, this damage is a little interesting. At level 1, most classes have damage thresholds of minor 1, major 7, severe 14. To have approximately a 50% chance to hit each threshold, as in damage that hits those average 4, 9... Wait, what? 4, 9, 13 thresholds on an average roll. Is that... What? I don't know that I understand this. Is this also a typo? I don't think it is. I think I just don't understand something. You can use the following for impromptu damage. What is this? So 4 is between 1 and 7, but 9 is not between 7 and 14, and 13 is below 14. So I don't know what's going on here. That bit might not be updated. That feels like a typo. Yeah. Okay. I was like, I feel like I'm just not understanding something. Yeah. It's the 9th of April, 2013. Yeah, okay. It's the date to hit the 9th of April. Okay. So as in damage that hits. So we'll just hope that these are the same, but to have an approximately 50% chance to hit each threshold, as in damage that hits those average thresholds on an average roll. So is this saying that it would on average hit the major threshold? Am I understanding that right? Part of the balance change is that all classes start at minor 1. The 4, 9, 13 was probably the averages of 1.2. I have to imagine. So okay, so let me just see what the average is. Minor. Oh, they do it for each thing. I see. So to have a 50% chance to hit the minor, you use 1d3 plus 2 or 1d6. 1d3 plus 2 or 1d6. What? Okay. 1d6 is an average of 3.5. 1d3 plus 2 is 1.5 plus 2, which is 3.5. Okay. So it's if you want more, if you want it to be more consistent versus more random, I guess? That's interesting. Those numbers are certainly not right. That's pre 1.3. Yeah, I mean, they're hitting 3.5 with these, so I think that they're targeting that 4. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't exactly hit 4 on average. It hits 3.5 on average. But if you round up, which they do tell you to do, it's hitting 4. So, yeah. Interesting. Major 2 HP is 2d8, 2d6 plus 2, or 1d12 plus 3. Very... Okay. Okay, this is something that absolutely should not be included on the tables. I understand why why they're not listing all these values. I get what they're doing. This is more complicated and, should be in like the hey, go off into the complicated section segment. I don't mind having, all of this. This section got really looked over on the update. It seems like, yeah. Interesting. This is interesting, yeah. To reliably hit each threshold, as in to hit the average thresholds, even on a below average roll, use these damage amounts. So if you want the hits to be more reliable, use these damages. I mean, okay. I will say, in general, I like the generalized structure of this guidance. 50% chance to hit, use these. Reliably hit, use these. I think that's very good. That's a very good split. And then having the same thing for damage at higher tiers, I think this is all very fair. The specifics of the execution are a little much, but also, I think if I had to levy any criticism, it would be nitpicking and just like, okay, I don't think these are balanced yet. Let's see. Characters will have damage threshold that rise to an average of that, which they would need to update. Adding a flat 1 to existing impromptu dice pools will help your damage keep pace. Adding +3 will keep pace with this, or adding 2d4 or a flat 4 will keep pace with severe. I love all of this advice. I think all of this advice is amazing insight. I really like all of this. I think they could tighten it up a little bit, pass by an editor, but overall, the information I like. It is a little overwhelming, but I like that it's there. I really need friendly animated talking polygons for dummies version of this. Yeah, it's intense. I think it needs a pass by an editor, but the information, I'm glad it's there. It's very solid. Yeah. This section is doing more damage than benefit in its current state, where it's half 1.2, 1.3. Yeah. I do think that in its current state, there is almost nothing you can glean from it, given that all of the numbers are wrong. So I do agree that, like, in concepts, I'm super down with it. I think that the form factor of the information that it wants to give me is good. But the fact that all the numbers are wrong means that I gotta be negative on it in its current implementation. Fix all the numbers and I think we're good, even though it's so overwhelming and maybe a little bit weirdly presented. If you fix the numbers, I think we can at least get to positive. If you can do the math yourself, you don't need the section. If you can't, the section will actively lie to you. Yeah, kinda, currently. Yeah, interesting. Scaling damage thresholds. Hey! This is exactly the type of chart I was talking about. Perfect. Yes. I want a version of this chart for everything. You don't even need to give me those fucking ranges or anything, but this chart is absolutely perfect. I really, really like it. Yeah. If you fix the numbers, you will still need to be real careful with the wording, with how complex the concept is. Yeah. This section is one that will be made or broken by an editor, but I'm very glad that they are at least putting they at least thought that it was needed. Now they need to actually execute on it. But yeah, it's all I think just like wrong, which is weird. It's weird that they've updated so much of the rulebook and like just not this. I don't know. It's very odd. At a glance, this one seems 1.3 accurate. Yeah, super weird. I think kind of a faux pas in playtesting. Like, if you're gonna Like, either leave it all 1.2 or make sure that it's all 1.3, because this is so much that got passed over. Like, all of these numbers just not getting updated for 1.3 is like a weirdly big miss. Maybe the most significant criticism I've had for Daggerheart yet. Yeah. And even that I'm a little lukewarm on, honestly. It would take more to glance to be sure, but it's a decent litmus test. Yeah, I think you're right. Interesting. Example adversary scaling. Oh, that's great. This is awesome. Taking the same enemy through all of the tiers. I love that. I really, really like that. Especially, a vague enemy like an assassin poisoner. Awesome. I'm not even going to look at the numbers because I don't know if they'll be lying to me, which sucks. But I really, really like that they go through an example of take this one concept that you might use at any tier, and here's how you go about scaling it up, or theoretically scaling it down. Yeah. Hey, my feedback as a playtester is that you need to make sure that the numbers are accurate, because I can't trust them right now. That's my main feedback, and it makes it harder to playtest the other stuff. Let's see. Okay, so I think that's most of it. Creating your world, sure, that's fine. I don't find this super necessary, and I think it's one of the big. I think it's one of the big weaknesses of the DMG is that it focuses so much on this sort of thing. But I will say, I'm glad that it is towards the end. Honestly, I kind of wish it was even after Chapter 6. Like, I wish that these were kind of switched. Because I think that you will want to customize your game in a world of your own or in an existing world. Like, in an existing setting. I think you'll want to customize your game in both of those. I think that creating your world should be the absolute last thing that is ever talked about. If you want to include it in your worlds, in your rules, that's totally fine. Like, I think that there's absolutely an audience for that, and it makes sense. But I think it should basically be the last thing. Because it's essentially like world building advice and like writing advice, which you can get from so many other places than this rule book. Like, you can attend writing classes, you can look up writing seminars, you can look up world building seminars. Fucking Brandon Sanderson has an entire YouTube channel dedicated to this. So I think that always, if you want to include this in a rule book, it should be the last thing. Customizing your game, I can't get that advice anywhere but your game. So I think that it should absolutely be before something like creating your world. I did study the Sablewood section in the locations before running the quick start. It helps flesh that out, but that's a specific use case. And I think that those use cases exist and are prevalent. I'm not saying that they don't exist. But I'm saying it's probably the least important thing in this rulebook. Because you can get that sort of advice other places. I know that in a perfect world, we would all love a single book to buy and nothing else, but I think world building stuff is an ideal use case for its own book. You could argue that. Yeah. I think I would like 0 of it or it to be at the end. Not every DM needs it. It could easily be better by getting more pages. Potentially, yeah. No current changes, cards, and then a lot of card changes. Okay. Oh, a world with just a single book on any subject would not strike me as an ideal one. I mean, that there are a lot of D&D. Oh, wait, a world with just a single book on any subject would not strike me as an ideal one. I don't know if I'm understanding you, Timpanist. Because I think, like, you could say that, like, Curse of Strahd is a single book on any subject. On a subject, it's on that module, that adventure. Same with, like, a lot of the planescapes. But I don't think that's what you're saying, but I can't quite tell. I don't mean to imply 0 third-party books, but a single necessary book to play the game. Yeah, that's what I like, a single necessary book to play the game. That's how Blades in the Dark is. Like, Blades in the Dark has the one book, and that's all you buy, and that's all there is. Versus PHB, DMG, MM. Yeah, I agree. I don't necessarily think that the DMG is fully necessary, but I think it would be hard to argue that the monster manual is not necessary for the way that D&D is mostly played. And even then, there are a lot of rules that are only in the DMG, so you do kind of need the DMG as well. Yeah. I do get what Daniel means. I just have a reflexive reaction because I always start my research into anything by reading 5 to 6 books that disagree with each other. Oh, I think we're generally talking about rule books. Yeah. Including things like gardening. No, this does not make me a good gardener. No, I think that you're definitely going into like how you should go about world building, how you should go about like more subjective things. But in terms of mechanics, I would like all of my mechanics to be housed in a single book. Yeah. Anyways, I think that's about it. And we're about to go into an ad, so I'm going to wrap it up before the ad. Feel free, and I don't have an option to skip it. I used all of my snoozes, unfortunately. But yeah, I think I'm gonna call it there because 3 o'clock was my soft end. So that's I think that's gonna be my call. Overall, good changes. I think good changes. And I'm unfortunately just gonna probably talk through the Twitch ad. Unfortunately. Hey, no problem, Mike Charm. Yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you everybody. Yeah, I think overall, version 1.3, I think improvement overall. I see a lot of direction, music. Oh no. Okay, hopefully music volume's better. Sorry about that. Yeah, overall, I give 1.3 a thumbs up. There are some ostensible like mentalities and like goals that I don't agree with. More precisely the advantage disadvantage mentality. But most of the mentality I agree with. I think it's going in a good direction. And most of the mechanical changes I think are good and solid. And some of them I think are great. And the heaviest critique that I have is freaking... Because, I mean, ultimately, the thing that, like, mechanically I disliked the most was the advantage-disadvantage thing, right? I don't think you need to roll more hope. I don't think you need to get more crits. But ultimately, I can make shit harder. Like, I can up DCs. I mean, they're still going to be rolling with hope more often, which I don't love, but I can put them in more difficult situations if need be, if I feel like things are going too well for them. So ultimately, I can work around that if that's the worst thing that we get. I think the actual worst thing about 1.3 is, oh man, I think they need an editor. I think 1.4 needs an editor. So I don't know. But other than that, I think overall, upvote. I think overall I like it. I think it was a net improvement overall. There were some changes I think were minor downgrades or side grades, but a lot of big upgrades and no big downgrades. I agree, Daniel. That's about where I am. I don't feel like I have the background to evaluate the changes, but I will try to my best to provide feedback from the newbie perspective once I try them. I think the newbie perspective is exactly as Daniel said, very valid. And I think especially if you feel that you being a newbie might be significantly impacting your opinion, I think just still giving your full opinion and just making a quick note about your experience level is totally valid. This is maybe a little bit of a confession. I didn't actually provide feedback on 1.2. I forgot. But I assume that they must ask you about your experience level. Every TTRPG that I've tested, one of the initial questions that they ask before you submit your feedback form is how much experience do you have? So I think that, like, you just tell them that accurately, and then, you know, they will process your feedback as needed. Especially in the GMing parts, because that does seem super relevant to the goal of recruiting new GMs, for one thing. Absolutely. Like, I think they will absolutely, like, it's one of the same general draws of, like, critical eyes. Like, an outsider newbie perspective is very valued by insiders and by really experienced people. So I think that you have a very, very valuable place within the playtest feedback process. That was one of the questions on the website. There's also a feedback section on Demiplane that may or may not have that. Okay, gotcha. I mean, good. I think it should absolutely be included. Not to say that, like, any advice should be valued more or less heavily, but just that it would tell you different things, which I think is very good and important. Like, especially if you have a feature that is getting brought up in almost every person that says they've, never DM'd before. If they've never DM'd before and almost every single one of those feedbacks brings up a very specific feature that doesn't get brought up in the more experienced DM side of things, I think that's a pretty good indication that that feature is not very clear. Like we were kind of talking about earlier, probably seems complex, but the complexity goes down a lot with familiarity. That doesn't necessarily mean you do or don't need to change it, but that gives you a very good sense of direction for, if you want to change it, how to go about changing it. That the core is okay, but maybe the presentation is wrong. So I think that it's a very, very valuable thing to delineate. Most new people only try the most popular product. They're going to have a lot of experienced feedback and not as much newer. Yeah, probably. Yeah. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to head out. And that's going to be it. I will see you guys tomorrow for generally finishing Baldur's Gate 3, and then maybe over the weekend, probably not though, if I had to guess, and then definitely Monday for episode, I believe, 47 of Critical Eyes. See if we can keep the streak going of no dropped frames, but it seems like we fixed it. So that'll be it. Have a good day. Have a good weekend if I don't see you tomorrow. And goodbye.